Yeah,
In
yeah,
the
go ahead.
Tenz video, my man's, it was only Chamber, and this guy has 8 rounds on this agent.
This roster for the current metagame with Chamber is like easily a top 3 team in the world.
I didn't feel challenged not only by Shopify, but literally any other team in this tournament.
It feels like there's literally something that is gone from his kit for him to be this underpowered.
I'm a slut for a good gun buddy. I'll be honest.
This round's a huge dogfight, honestly. Like, Zeppa just goes hard in the paint. Like, I don't know. You know, like, what else is there to say?
There's big money moves continuing into Sentinels this week as it's finally confirmed. So, Sasi and Pankata finally joined Sentinels, but with a Sentinels rebuild around Tenz. So all the rumors of Tenz leaving, maybe going to 100 Thieves, maybe going to Optic or whatever is left of Optic, it's like, no. Sentinel says we're going to build around the system with Tenz. They're not going to fuck around here, and they're just going to use Tenz as a star opper for this team. First off, before we talk about Pankata and Sasi, I want to know your thoughts here, Anderzz, about Tenz re-signing as Sentinels. Is this still a great playbook for the team?
Time will tell. It's one of those things where, like, at least in my opinion, Tenz hasn't been put in a system to succeed in so long that it's very hard to get a read on where his ceiling's going to be if he is put back into that system. Like, when was the last time we truly saw Tenz in an environment where he was just set up to absolutely clown on everyone, like a Yay-esque setup?
Tenz and
I
friends.
mean, it's been like a year plus. So, like, does he still have that level of, like, just pure monstrosity to him where now that he's falling back into a system that's going to support him, is he just going to pop off? That's presumably what Sentinels is going for.
So with Sasi and Pankata joining Sentinels too, and Sasi even on top of that joining the roster, you know, had some heartfelt words to say about the previous roster that was that he was with, with Loud, saying, you know, we had some great times. You know, I love my teammates. We accomplished some great shit, especially when I started in League of Legends in 2013. Look at me now. Look at what we built. And then suddenly he just joined Sentinels. But then on the other end, Pankata showing that, you know, people were questioning about his English a bit, but it works here. He says, hello, Tenz, follow me back or I'm quitting the team right now. So there's going to be some things that they're trying to reach first. Pankata, another title with Sentinels. Sasi, another title with Sentinels, but Pankata is just a Tenz follow. But, well, now these two players joining Sentinels, Tanner, be the missing piece to allow Tenz to actually pop off like he is supposed to, where he's going to be able to get enabled like we're supposed to see Tenz play.
Yeah, so I think that these players obviously slide in very well. I think anybody would say that Sasi and Pankata, anybody on Loud going anywhere is kind of an upgrade, especially when you look at the Sentinels roster. I would think like Sasi kind of over Shazam and Pankata over Zombs in their specific roles.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, sorry, and I'm backtracking a second.
Yeah,
in the Tenz video, my man's, it was only Chamber, and this guy has 8 rounds on this agent. I don't know what the hell that's all about, especially when Tenz on Chamber is not going to be the same Tenz that we fell in love with as arguably one of the better players in the world on this Sentinels rise. It was kind of like equivalent to how Misfits played with Fluorescent, where they're like, Floor, go kill, but also use your brain. I feel like Tenz kind of created that play style, and it's completely different. You can still play aggressive on the Chamber, sure, and push forward, but it's not the same as smoking yourself out and dashing away and having like fun jet plays. So I think this kind of tells us, I think everybody's like, please, Tenz, just learn how to play Chamber, and maybe they're leaning that way. I don't think it's gonna be the same Tenz though.
We were also saying Tenz, please play some Raze too at some point. But with now the newest rumors with Cypher being buffed, this actually might look like a roster that's going to be complete. Like if a Cypher buff, and technically Def is that 5th player joining Sentinels, Zekin could play some Raze, Jet could be played by Tenz again. Anderzz, this might be looking like a great powerhouse for NA in 2023.
So here's my one concern for this team is what happens if Sentinel characters, not Sentinels the team, what happens if Sentinel characters get buffed? Like, who's playing the Flash on this team now?
Yeah,
because okay, so we've got Def playing Flash Initiator in that scenario, Pankata on Smokes, Sasi on Info. are we just running no Senti now? We're going double duelist? Because that sounds a little bit sus. Like,
Yeah.
are we just assuming that the meta is going to shift back that direction? Because that's sort of what would have to happen for that to not be soft inting. So, like,
Yeah.
that's my one concern for the structure of this team is, like, who the hell is playing flashes for you in a metagame where you're forced to run a traditional Sentinel?
See, every time we talk about comps or whatnot and where the direction might go with the meta, I like how the brain's already always activated here for Anderzz, which is why
Yeah.
it's great to have you on, Anderzz, for us to talk about this next segment, actually, because, Harbor officially out today. There was actually some moments where last week we were able to do some playtests around Harbor even last week. I didn't get to play him personally, but I got to play against a Harbor. I thought it was pretty chill, but overall, I mean, it looks like the kit is strong, not strong. Maybe some conversations around what's been going on around the community saying you can't really play this agent as a single controller, but there's a lot of shit that you could do, at least with this Harbor, especially with this tidal wave. I forgot the names. I haven't really followed the names yet, but the kit
Cascade,
looks,
High
yeah,
Tide,
there you go.
Cove
See,
right here.
Tanner's already fucking doing some homework for the
I
next
got it all.
GameChangers
yeah.
VCTs. But yeah, so what are your thoughts right now, guys, on the Harbor? I'll start things off with Tanner at least, because I know Anderzz is gonna have a lot.
As
to
I
say
say, I'm gonna
usually.
go off. So Tanner, take the stage first.
Yeah, so Harbor is fucking cool, man. I think this agent is really cool. I don't know if it was how noticed it was, but when this ultimate is happening and somebody's getting stunned, it actually has like a cool little trail up in the sky. So you can see it right there.
Mhm.
So you get extra information that somebody is in that general area, and if not about to get stunned, then you know kind of where they're at. So I thought that was really cool how you get some good info out of that ultimate, as well as, doing the controller thing. Fuck, man, I don't know. He just doesn't seem like enough. The wall, I did this thing one time. I was playing him on Breeze, and I was like, guys, check this out. I lined up as high as I could for his his high tide, thinking it would work like Vipers, and it was the shortest shit I've ever seen. His high tide is not as long as the toxic screen, so I'm really interested to see the actual brains behind the game get their hands on this agent, especially in kind of like a competitive atmosphere.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think my first thoughts are he's cool, but he's nothing special. I don't think we're gonna see him in every single game.
Yeah, well, shout out to Sliggy at least, as we get to see him like work the tech around
Yeah.
what we could do, what Harbor could actually bring into a map, and trying to already study a meta around it, already putting that wall in the back, like trying to see how you could actually split a site, which looks like it's the main characteristic around this agent. And also, there's been an event happening this weekend where Harbor has been played, right? This is Spike Nations for Blast happened over the weekend. Harbor was played, and I think what we're gonna watch a little bit of these clips. I want to know your thoughts, Anderzz, around this agent.
Yeah, so I think that this agent is a little stylistically confused. Like, a lot of his elements are very controlling in nature. Like the fact that he has a slow, the fact that he has like effectively defuse secure in his cove. But the problem is that his entire kit has to be operated in a very aggro way. So he's trying to do two diametrically opposed things simultaneously, and the end result is just a very confused kit. Like, if I were to sort of give Harbor his stylistic niche, like Viper's the map slicer, Harbor's almost trying to be like the retake slicer.
Correct.
Like, you can't play him as a side anchor. That's not gonna fucking work. You're inting if you do that. And so you're playing him almost in a way where you're probably playing him on your strong sides consistently. You're using him in some sort of like early round counter aggro where you toss your high tide. The fact that it lasts as long as it does and then it comes up on a 25 second rolling cooldown after that 15-second duration means that you can counter aggro, use it, and then where he shines the most in retakes, it's going to be back up by the time that becomes relevant. And so I think that's sort of where he's going to fall, but sort of following that line of reasoning, that isn't a primary controller, not even close. And so what situation do you get where you're running double controller, but that secondary controller can't function as a side anchor? Because now we're now talking about a situation where, okay, I have to run a primary controller. I'm running Harbor secondary controller. I realistically have to run a true side anchor, so I'm probably running a Sentinel on the other half of the map. that means that I'm either running Info Initiator, Flash Initiator, or I'm running Duelist and one of those two, meaning that I'm dropping one of my primary initiator types. We're either running Flashless or Infoless, or we're running a Duelist.
Yeah,
Those are the avenues that you have to play Harbor in, and it's like, I don't think the meta's in a place where that's really optimal right now. Far from it, in fact.
and that's why some opinions that follows what you're saying as well here, Anderzz, is potentially Harbor shouldn't be like a single controller type of in your comp, right? So Harbor's the worst in every controller already in the game. Harbor is going to be the worst agent in the game, mark my word. So that's from Eccles and BCJ. Yay, on the other hand, though, as you mentioned as well, it seems to be a good retake agent, right? With the abilities that Harbor could bring out. I agree with that in some sense, but at the same time, don't forget that the High Tide, which if I'm not mistaken, is that signature ability where he puts the wall up. So he could split the map on a retake, right? But the thing is, it also slows your teammates going through the wall.
Yeah.
So if you want to try to do a High Tide with an initiator flashing through to get the best value out of the High Tide for a retake, then it might not be the best way to be able to retake a site. Secondly,
Anderzz hated that.
yeah, and his Cove gets broken by one satchel. So
Yeah.
you could cancel that a lot.
Here's the problems with this agent is like I talked all my comments thus far have been like very high level like macro analysis sort of shit about how he fits into teams stylistically, how he fits into compositions. If you want to get down to the brass tacks of his actual ability micro, Cove dies in less than 2 seconds if you're shooting it with a Vandal. His slow is so short that it's effectively non-existent. The agent feels completely half-baked, and genuinely, I was talking with some of my buddies about this, it feels like there was a fire drill type moment based off of public perception on Riot's end, and they literally yanked a mechanic from this agent. It feels like there's literally something that is full up gone from his kit for him to be this underpowered. Like, in my opinion, Cascade should have the same level of bullet impenetrability that Cove has. So that you can actually push with it. You lean into the aggro nature of the agent. His stylistic identity gets more aligned. Like, it feels like, and I mean, if you look at one of the trailers, his wall is very clearly blocking bullets. And yet neither of his walls in-game block bullets. Is this a situation where Riot straight up had that mechanic part of his kit, and then they saw public perception being like, the fuck is this? And then they just pulled it before release. Like, it feels like that because he is so weak. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Even the High Tide doesn't even slow people when you're actually pushing a wall out. So better yet, I bet you this is all like a bait opinion from Anderzz anyways. He's already in the lab and there's going to be some shit cooked up.
I've got some crazy shit with him.
That's what I'm saying, right? But at least something that's not a bait and something that's confirmed is finally another North American NA VCT partnership program that has now been confirmed, and that's with Cloud9. Full roster finally being announced as we expected after it was reported repeatedly by members of our community around the leaks and the journalists. We actually have the core of Vanity, Zeppa, and Leaf alongside as Ye and Zelsis. I want to know your thoughts, Danner. How does this roster look? Will it actually be that Cloud9 that we knew from 2021?
Yeah, we kind of talked about Cloud9, I think it was last week, and I like this roster a lot. I think you kept a really solid core. The core of Cloud9 that just worked for the longest time and looked like the best team in North America. And then things get a little weird because Jetta leaves, Curry comes on, not a whole lot of time. But the new additions, I think, no offense to Curry, Zelsis and Ye are just better players. Obviously, they play different roles, but I think Zelsis is the best at his one of the best at his like flex role. And then Ye is obviously the best in the world, right? So I really like that they got two guys that I think can essentially help themselves out in Zelsis and Ye. They've already been doing it for a really long time and really showing off on rosters that might not be the best rosters, right? Zelsis on Sentinels before with Shroud on it, and it's kind of like, well, what? And then Leaf, Vanity, and Zeppa just get to just keep doing what they were doing, which was working for a really long time. So yeah, I think this is really scary. I think this video is also perfect because I think they are going to be one of the heavyweights when it comes to the teams that we're looking at for the Americas League.
Yeah, I feel that C9 has been like on a path to find themselves again ever since they lost Zeta, right? So losing a great Silva player, a great Breach. Zeppa has to play that initiator role, and overall, even Leaf even started falling down a bit in terms of his stats and numbers playing a Jet. So now that you actually have El Diablo joining the roster. Zels is being a great flex player for this team. Is this the winning solution now for these 5 players to actually beat the hype around Sentinels and 100 Thieves here, Anderzz?
Funnily enough, harken back to my concerns with the Sentinels roster. This feels like a very short-sighted roster design, because what the hell happens if we have to play normal Sentinels again? Like, this roster for the current metagame with Chamber is like easily a top 3 team in the world. Easily. That assumes like all of these rumored super teams in EMEA, like accounting for all of the crazily stacked like giga rosters that we're going to get globally. This still looks like a top 3 team in the world in the current meta. But what happens if Chamber gets nerfed in the ground? Okay, we put Ye back on to Jet. That's kind of a no-brainer. But where does Leaf go? Are we running double duelists constantly? Because that seems like the only direction that this team can go. If you harken back to Champions 2021, when we saw Leaf on non-duelist roles, wasn't anything to particularly excite me. I'm like, that's not a jab at him as a player. That's putting a very specialized, high-caliber player in an off-spec role and him underperforming on it. This entire team architecture is set up to have that problem. I don't understand it.
Well, I could see Lee still being able to play a Raze whenever they need it, and then Zelsis, we've seen what he's done with version 1 under Vanity's IGLing as a Killjoy during the Iceland 2021, where there was a few mistakes against Liquid, but overall his Killjoy looked pretty good, so that could come out. But I think two people that aren't mentioned in this roster is the coaching staff, right? MCE and Cupert. And we already know about MCE. We know what Cupert has brought with the guard and how MCE sees high regard around Cupert. But Cupert also joins this roster as a 6th player, having IGL experience, having coaching experience, and also being able to fill in case something happens in the main roster. I think this is actually an underrated and good pickup going into Cloud9 here, Tanner.
Yeah, and I think it shows that Cloud9's like idea of a 6th man is so much more than just somebody who's just going to be a substitute, right? Or teams who might be looking at like, hey, we actually need a Raze player. Who is our 6th man going to be? So I really like this pickup, thinking really holistically for the 6th man, and then kind of also having that contingency of if we do need a sub, Cupert can do it.
Yeah. Well, with that, good luck to Cloud9. I'm super excited about this roster as well. NA's shaping up to be having some strong powerhouses with what's confirmed with Sentinels and Cloud9 so far.
If you've been enjoying Valoranting, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you get every episode hot off the presses.
Speaking about that with Cloud9, let's switch over to the ladies division, right? Into Game Changer scene. So Cloud9 White, no surprise, they win again. Next segment. No, just kidding. Let's get into that though, right? It's Game Changers once again, series number 3. I mean, Cloud9 has been dominating throughout this whole bracket. We got to watch and cast a little bit as well. And let's see, actually, after C9 won, they had a little bit of a conversation to reflect back into the event. So let's see what they have to say.
I think this tournament we've actually like lost the least amount of rounds like total in any like GC we've ever played. I think the most rounds we lost was what, like 7. I didn't feel challenged not only by Shopify but literally any other team in this tournament.
It was nice to see everyone else get challenged though. I feel like we were just watching the event happen. We were like a non-factor, I feel like, as in just watch everyone else like get 13-11 and like drop maps, but we didn't drop any maps either. So very unchallenged.
You can even see Jazik is just like not talking, bored at the bottom. It's like, when am I going to get a challenge? And even Mel says that maybe Berlin's not going to be a challenge once they get to that stage at the Champions. What's your thoughts on that here, Anderzz?
I mean, I think that's taking it a step too far. I mean, there's no denying it. Like, this is the most dominant they've been in a long time. I think the max rounds that they dropped was like 7, 9, something like that. Like, they didn't just win every map they played. They kind of dunked every map that they played. So, like, them going to Berlin confident is completely valid. That said, like, I don't think you should be using your ability to stomp North America as your measure for confidence going into the international. Like, it seems like they're getting dangerously close to the line between confidence and arrogance, and I really want to see them perform well when they get to Berlin. Like that's the narrative everyone wants in Game Changers. Like C9 White, this unbeatable juggernaut that's dominated NA for forever. We want them to go to this first international and take it the fuck home. And I just want to make sure that they're not getting ahead of themselves and being like, oh, we dunk NA, so we'll dunk international. It's like G2 goes in, X10, like there are teams in the international GC circuit that you cannot sleep on to any extent whatsoever, or they will just run you over.
Yeah, the fun storyline around it is maybe even looking back at like early 2021 when Sentinels was like really at the top and going into that year, everybody, all the teams around the world wanted to beat Sentinels, and it almost feels like it might be the same storyline going to Game Changers, right? G2 goes and wants to beat them, but at the same time here, Tanner, there's also Team Liquid from Brazil that wants a piece of that pie.
Yeah, hey, and you guys know I'm high on Team Liquid Brazil. I love Team Liquid Brazil. I do think what I think is happening, what I'm hoping is happening, because the teams that we see at the top of the regions have some type of competitive experience, before coming into Game Changers, right? So Cloud9, they all kind of doing like the Counter-Strike thing. G2 goes and all do the Counter-Strike thing. So what I hope is happening that Cloud9 White is just selling the show, because even if you just compared everything, right, you have to assume that G2 in EMEA is probably just as strong as, you know, our Cloud9 here and the Team Liquid there, right? Every region probably has that one incredibly strong team, and I think Cloud9 White knows that. But this Team Liquid Brazil team, you were even saying it, I think, for was it APAC, Anderzz, that
there's X10 and Alter Ego Celeste are both like pretty fucking crazy teams.
And they also come into this with like minor LAN experience, where a Jazzykins, who is incredibly young and doesn't have experience like that, even if it's Team Liquid Brazil, they're playing right now just in a studio. Like I feel like that right there is something that I guess you have to have that confidence to try and shake those nerves before it happens, because I think Cloud9 White might actually look rocky on I guess at the international LAN. It's just so big, and they don't really have like a whole lot of experience behind it. Like Mel, obviously we've seen, but yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm excited for it. I'm not getting my hopes up for Cloud9 White. I do think that they will be incredibly strong, if not the strongest. But I definitely think G2 goes in, Guild, the X10s. They're gonna put up a fight, man.
Yeah,
I've lived that meme firsthand, by the way. That's a great time.
Yeah, how is that with version X, right? So I mean that's it. Shout out to Chloe, by the way. So any team so far in North America having to play against C9 White is struggling so far, and we're gonna see if it's gonna be the same case here in Berlin, because that's coming up in about a month. 8 teams going into the stage. Although I think, Tanner, we're not gonna really touch on that topic, but there's gonna be a big crowd there, right? Let's go into the next segment while we stay in the EMEA, though, and talk about all the roster rumors and confirmations that's been going around there. And instead of going into like every single one of being, this is rumored that, because it seems like we're doing that every single week. I kind of want to know, with everything that you guys have been reading on Reddit, seeing the announcements coming out, seeing the rumors coming out from every single journalist, who do you think has the best offseason roster changes going into 2023? Is it teams like Na'Vi that's apparently going to take FPX and maybe even CNED? Is it Fnatic now that they have Leo, Koi, Karman Carb, all these powerhouse orgs? What do you think, Anderzz?
I think that your top 3 is going to be Karmine, Fnatic, Na'Vi. I think that anyone who doesn't have them as their top 3 is probably speculating really aggressively on the TL roster that purportedly has like Redgar, Nats going to it. That's probably the argument for a 3rd, 4th that might muscle its way in.
Yeah. Is that a roster rebuilding behind you in the background there?
Yeah,
What's going on?
Dude, landscapers. Unlucky. That's actually the sound when anybody other than those top 3 has to play one of those top 3 for the first season.
That's awesome. Tanner, what do you think? Do you think it's a Fnatic now that they picked up Leo and apparently potentially maybe even picking up Chronicle, or who do you have your sights on for the team to look out for EMEA for 2023?
Yeah, so I think first I just want to say I'm glad that a lot of people are finding homes. We talked to Safe on the show a little bit ago. Obviously, Guild didn't make it in, and now we see Leo finding a home. Very cool to see that. I think Na'Vi, if you're looking at it, Na'Vi seem like, I feel like it'd be kind of silly, although I believe they're losing artists, right? That you know, picking up FPX, the majority of FPX, that makes them look like a really strong team. I don't know what was going on with Fnatic. I always felt like Fnatic, they just couldn't find their mark. Like always one of the strongest teams, but when it came to the big show, you know, over and over again, it just seemed like, I don't know if it was a pressure thing or if they just had such high expectations for themselves. It seems like they just couldn't meet it. So I do think that Leo is a good addition to this team. And if you're keeping it kind of the same, you're adding Chronicle to it, I do think Fnatic looks strong, but just based off of what happens when you make roster moves, I think grabbing 4 that have already played together, like Na'Vi are doing, that speaks to me the most in way of like strength.
Yeah, and even speaking about Fnatic, in terms of that roster, we got to see them firsthand most recently during the Superdome tournament that's happening over at Meta. So, you know, thoughts around that. I know some people are already mad seeing that Fnatic lost to a team that they call like the tier 4 in the region or whatnot, but Mini did come out and say, look, we're trying different things. We're trying to get, you know, our new players acclimated into the system. We're trying to have Bolster Call on the fly and see how that's going to pan out just to get ready for 2023. But overall here, just looking at the playstyle and how those matches came about, what's your thoughts, Anderzz, on Fnatic? Because I'm pretty sure you still have a little bit of bias going into that team.
Yeah. So this is what I'm going to use as an analog for people. Remember right after I joined Fnatic and we played Red Bull Homeground and literally like intentionally ran it down as we were testing out a bunch of things, and then we went top 8 at Champions when nobody expected us to make it out of groups? Yeah, I think that is a very similar situation here where they're experimenting with a couple of things. I know that they're trying to transition Durka back onto primary duelist, get Alpha onto chamber. Bind is actually the only map at the event where that wasn't the case, and I think Mini in a separate tweet literally said that was what was happening. And so I don't know why people would look at an event where they're explicitly saying that they are in a transitional period and be like, oh, this is clearly an indicator of like how good they're going to be. Like that's asinine. Come on now.
But what's your thoughts on Alphayer here playing Chamber, Tanner? Are we removing that potential of the ceiling of what Alphayer could bring? And then Anderzz is smiling, so I'll let you answer right after.
Yeah, I do think it kind of removes the ceiling a little bit, but I like that they're exploring this option instead of kind of having like saying, hey, we need a dedicated chamber player, like we're kind of seeing Ye as a dedicated chamber player. Having Alphayer play the chamber and kind of working that in when those nerfs do eventually come, like Anderzz is talking about, Alphayer can play something else, right? He is very comfortable elsewhere in really, I feel like a handful of roles, but especially as that duelist role. Durka can obviously fall back on something as well. So I think it's nice that they're just trying it with what they have versus trying to find that elsewhere. Also for this tournament, like, dude, with Leo on the team at the very least, right? Like you're trying to build camaraderie, and the best way to do that is by playing the video game together. And sometimes playing ranked sucks. So why not just have some fun while you're playing, you know, in a Superdome tournament, right? So I like this look that they're kind of just having fun with it ultimately. But yes, Alphayer onto the chamber I think is cool because when the inevitable comes, then they still have options.
Yeah, Anderzz?
Quick aside, I think that it's super cool that they're like playing that Superdome event for team synergy, but not only that, Leo already has LAN experience with most of his teammates. Just let that, like that alone is kind of huge value. As far as Alpha on Chamber goes, this is something that literally before Alpha got signed, I was like, oh, they're going to leave Durka on primary duelist and Alpha's going to go to Chamber. I was actually stunned when the opposite ended up being true, because if you look back at Alpha's stats when he's playing in Turkey, dude was a 400 ACS jet player. Like his opping has always been ludicrous. So I was actually, I knew that they brought him in as a primary Sentinel replacement for Magnum. So I was like, why the hell is this guy not on Chamber? All of his numbers say he's going to be disgusting out in it. So like, just let Durka do Durka things and maintain that like aggressive tempo setting that he's known for, and bring in this Sentinel player that has shown an ability to op at a world-class level. Like, I think that once they settle with these roles, they're going to be fucking insane. It's going to be ridiculous. No bias. Smile.
Yeah, so we'll see how that pan out, right? 2023 is around the corner, but at least there's going to be a few events that still during the off season that they could play, and we could still see some flash in the pan here for Fnatic as we move forward. But sticking around here with the VCTs, but this time going a little bit lower than the partnership program. We're going back into the Ascension here in North America. From what we've been hearing so far, I mean, continuing that conversation of Cloud9 White reflecting on their win in Game Changers. There were other topics that they were discussing around, which is now even potentially participating in the Ascensions tournaments, or so they think, right? So let's have a listen to that conversation right there.
I hope too that there's there's like a lot of hype this tournament like around certain players too, like on like other teams, and I really hope to see next year they play in the co-ed tournaments and even themselves get like co-ed opportunities and don't like pigeonhole themselves into only Game Changers, because I think there's like a plenty of talent that we saw that would be awesome to see in co-ed teams and Ascension teams and like partner teams one day.
They can't. That's fucked up.
If
Yeah,
they can't, that would be
yet.
disastrous, and
That
the
would be-
entirety of Game Changers existing would be undermined. It would be pointless to have Game Changers.
I think, yep.
I don't think there's official info out yet, but I'm assuming since we were able to do VCT qualifiers the last 2 years, that wouldn't be blocked either. Since it's a co-ed space, not necessarily a men's only space.
Yeah. So let's attack this in two parts, right? I think the first part is Mel also talking about Game Changers, where she's hoping that all the Game Changers teams that are currently participating are going to continue to play, the mix events or whatnot. And she's been preaching that since Game Changers 1, since for the women summertime edition, right? Like, play the nights weekly, play their nerd weeklies, and not everybody's playing it. So take advantage of that, right, Tanner? So do you hope to see that as well? Do you echo what Mel is actually addressing here?
Yeah, and it's tough because for the same reason why tier 1 teams don't want to play in tier 2 or tier 3 tournaments, they don't want to get their ass whipped and get shit on. I can see that. Like, Game Changer teams also don't want to do that, right? The negativity behind it is really prevalent, so I completely understand. But if you want to be the best in the world, and it's obviously easy for me to say outside looking in, but if you want to be the best in the world, you really do have to try and just push past this stuff. And eventually you are going to silence the doubters, right? You are going to silence the haters. And that's what Cloud9 White has been doing, right? Although they haven't had the deepest runs in the VCTs, we're seeing that kind of be one of the components that has led to major success for that team. So I would love to see everybody who can. I don't know what Ascension's going to look like if they have set teams. Wow. I mean, guys, I just put chapstick on. I promise it wasn't lipstick. I don't know what that was. Why didn't anybody tell me? My lips are so damn red, man. What the heck? Anyways, yes, please, if you can, start playing in the tournaments all over the place. If you want to be an actual competitor, otherwise you're just going to be lacking the experience that everybody else is getting.
Yeah, and now the other end is talking about, hey, what are our chances to get into Ascension, right? There's no information around that yet. Nuki, the manager, as we hear towards the end of the conversation, is still waiting on that. But we've seen some organizations come and go as well as the partnership program started. But there's apparently some other organizations that's looking to make an entry into Valorant in the Ascension program. Most notably here, FlyQuest, potentially TSM, maybe even Exit. What have you been hearing in the rumbles right now, Anderzz, around the Ascension?
I mean, nothing beyond what Bo is mentioning in these tweets.
Okay.
Like, I would be... I think that the safest bet is, like, look at who's in the LCS. Look at who's in the LEC. These orgs are probably looking at Ascension rosters. Like, it's going to be the usual culprits, and I think that it's all going to really boil down to... like whether or not these organizations can field teams within a reasonable budgetary bound, because I think a huge part of it, to be completely honest, is some of these organizations are looking to come in a fairly budget way and are waiting to see if and what super teams assemble beforehand. Because if I plan on not throwing the bag at Ascension, and then someone like G2 is going to come in and throw the bag at Ascension, then I'm probably going to go super budget or developmental for that roster year. I'm not going to try and outgun a like multi-million-dollar super team that's just going to clown on everybody. That's stupid and irresponsible of me as an organization.
Yeah.
So I'm probably just going to go really good head coach, really good assistant coach, and 5 players that I can mold. Probably super young guys that I'm either going to build into a super team in the following year, or that I'm going to be able to ship off to partner teams in the off season.
Like an EG, like a Ghost, something like that as well.
Exactly. Like, I just think that teams are being smart about it is all. And they're waiting to see what juggernauts enter Ascension before they start throwing around checks.
Yeah, go ahead, Tanner.
Yeah, what happens when fucking Lenny Time version 3 wins Ascension? They
Brimstone
don't have an
Gaming
org
will fuck
behind.
them up. That's what.
Yeah. So like, but like for real, what happens when a team that was not good enough didn't meet the criteria, I'll say, for partnership, wins Ascension and then gets into partnership, right? If they still don't, if 1 year later they don't meet the criteria of clout and great finances and all this stuff, what's gonna happen then, right? Is Riot gonna be like, well, we understand that you won, but you're still not a great candidate for partnership. So
You're gonna have people buying.
It's only 2
franchise
years
spots.
anyways. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
so-
like well, and here's the thing: is like there's no requirement that you keep any of the players really that you brought up through Ascension, right?
correct.
So say that situation happens, Org X buys the slot, completely churns the roster, other than like maybe a star player or two. That's just gonna be the situation.
It almost feels like there's going to be. Well, I think at the same time you are not necessarily going to have to. You don't have to keep the roster, but there's also going to be some poaching rules around all of that as well, right? So I like to think that maybe the Ascension program could have been some sort of what the Academy system could have been that we alluded to. But then now at this point, if you can't poach anybody outside of that roster fully, then and they've made it into the partnership program for those 2 years, then it makes it a little bit more convoluted. Maybe now it's just going to be assigning to like a short-term deal or something like that from the org for those 2 years and see what happens after those 2 years for those players. I think it's still a great opportunity and a business opportunity for businesses to make money and for players to develop themselves to join the partnership program, right? So that said, good luck to all the teams here once we get more information around the Ascension League. That said, though, it's time to have a little bit more fun in terms of not talking necessarily about esports, because Valoranting is all about everything around around Valorant, not esports only. That said, new skin coming out with the new patch. It is the Iron Skin version 2, which now has Vandal Iron. Our thoughts, Tanner? You already bought the buddy, but apparently you don't really like the rest of the skins.
No, you know what? I think the variants are a little lacking for me. Although I wanted variants on the first Ion, after looking at them here, they just look like the Infinity set from the Battle Pass. The knife is very cool, but I'm a slut for a good gun buddy. I'll be honest. And I liked the drip with my weapons and my gun buddy. So the Ion Owl drone that you get from this bundle, super sick. I put 10 on my account today just so I could buy the gun buddy. But the skins itself, doesn't really do it for me.
There were a few people I've been looking around the TLs that are like, oh, I wish we actually had like some sort of like a pink pastel colorway around this Iron bundle. That would have been sick. And I think it prompted a conversation that we had earlier on, even getting ready for the show here, Tanner, where we're hoping to see some sort of more feminine skin line, anything in terms of those cosmetics. And I think that'd be kind of cool to see, Anderzz.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like skin set's cool and all. The one thing that will always bug me is that the original Ion skins hurt frame rates. And me being the min-maxer that I am, I'm just like, did they fix that or not? Because if they didn't, then I'm not interested. Unlucky.
What are we still buying it? I'm actually
I might buy it on my Smurf just to have a good Vandal skin.
Really? Damn, you're that fucking rich, eh? All right.
I mean,
buying shit on your
like
Smurf.
that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the owl drone actually looks fucking cool. I might be down for that. Actually, I'm literally not following the show anor. I'm just looking at my store. I opened up
the little
Valorant,
owl
and
drone's cool, man.
It actually looks pretty fucking cool. I'm not gonna lie. I might cop that. But there's also, when we're looking at the battle, or not only the battle pass but the Iron skin line, we've noticed that there was a lot of split going into that going into the skin line. And I like this. Good shout out to Valoranting on those ones, because Split, hot take, still one of my favorite maps. Split and Bind top there as the best maps here in Valorant that we have currently. But I'd love to see Split come back. What's wrong, Anderzz? You don't like some Bind?
Said Bind?
Like Split?
Get Bind the fuck out of here.
You said Bind,
Bring Split
bro?
back for Bind. That's the move. That's the move.
For Breeze.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed with that either.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that either.
See, for Pearl. Yeah,
Oh,
Bind
no,
is still
Pearl
fucking
is great.
good.
Pearl is extra tasty.
Do you guys think this is coming back though? So now
I think Riot's baiting the fuck out of us.
Okay. It's not like CS:GO where like you take a map away from active duty, you rework it, bring it back in ASAP.
I think that this is way too fast of a turnaround. I think that the precedent that they would set by bringing it back this quickly is a little bit unreal. Like, it would just be a really, really weird precedent to set where it's like, oh, we're gonna rotate maps, but then we're gonna bring it back like a month and a half later, so that you, like, are teams supposed to continue scrimming this map if it's going to be reintroduced on such a fast wheeler? Like, that seems excessive. What I
Yeah.
think they're doing is that they're just intentionally inserting split wherever they possibly can to keep it front of mind for the fan base, so that there is sort of like, there is what we're exactly doing right now. There's an extant
buzz.
longing to have the map back,
Mm.
so that when it eventually does come back, it's like a big fanfare, despite the fact it's literally just them re-releasing content that they've had all along.
What if
So
we're
I wanna-
hyping up so much and then we fucking the map hasn't changed at all, and then we're just all disappointed, Tanner?
Well, so I like Split the way that it is. I believe anybody. I give everybody a benefit of the doubt. If you tell me something, why would you lie to me, right? So I've been hearing people say that they're making changes to Split. That is super cool. But also, what has Riot done since the beginning of Valorant? They've listened to the fans, and I think that there is a good chance that Split does come back, because we're like, dude, the best games that we've ever seen were played on this map competitively. So please bring it back. And
Yeah.
Riot, this is me asking you, please bring it back.
Well, at least we also have an organization that's been listening to the fans a bit too, or if not just listening to us, saying like, holy shit, they're actually sticking to the brand name, which is Global Esports. Global Esports originally started off with a 10-player roster that was announced potentially all to be an Indian roster in the VCTs in East Asia. But then most recently, they decided to use their import, being Aaron from former Exit, to fly over to Korea and play for the team. But now look at this. Most recently, at 5 a.m., while I was still playing the Battle Pass and doing spike rushes, I tweeted this out to our producer and say, look at this shit. They actually brought in Batsy, Ronsky, and Texture, while also keeping SK Rossi and Lightning Facts and bringing in Monyet too. So they've really gone global at this point with this roster here, Anderzz. I was going to say Aaron because I'm looking at his name.
I mean, this roster is fucking wild. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like, do I think that this is going to be the most competitive roster in like the Pacific region? Absolutely not. There's no chance. Is it going to be super entertaining and be like a viewership engine for the region? Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that that's probably the most underappreciated part of it, is like, this is not going to be a bad roster. Let me set that. It's not going to be the best roster. It's definitely not going to be the worst. But what it is going to do is bring a true, like, multicultural fan base to the Pacific region. Like, you're going to have NA fans who still want to go watch Aaron. You're going to have Korean fans who want to watch Bazia and Texture. You're going to, like, everyone's going to sort of collapse and concentrate around this one team. And it's just going to be great. Like, it's going to boost viewership for the region, and that's what I care about.
Those are my two question marks, though, because even people in the chat are saying, okay, we're looking at this roster. There's a lot of fucking duelists in this roster. But it's also the trend of what Korea's been doing, right? Taking a shit ton of Jets and then just making them play in different roles. That said...
do we remember what New Turn was as a team?
Exactly. But then also, that said, the coaches that they're bringing in here into the team, they're bringing in a Korean coach, they're bringing in an Indian coach. But this international roster is truly international, where English may not be the primary language for this team. So as much as Anderzz is saying this could be a great team, I feel that this might be an issue in terms of team synergy, Tanner.
100%. Anderzz had a stat about it, not necessarily kind of set in stone stat, but basically saying that international rosters don't win grand finals is ultimately what it got at. I don't think there's ever been one. And kind of looking at this, I don't know Aaron's background. I thought maybe kind of making it work, Bazi and Texture.
He's Asian.
And then I see, yeah, but it's like, I don't know if he speaks Korean.
Like,
right?
what's the common tongue of this team?
Exactly. So even if there was, and like English is like relatively common, but a lot of Korean players don't actually speak English. I think we kind of see that in the League of Legends scene. And then I see just Ronsky slapped right there in the middle. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I don't know if this guy
English isn't even a common tongue for this team.
I don't know what's going on.
And that's the thing, right? Because even if you're looking at JoJo, when he was calling for Northception, he was like calling in Japanese, translating Korean, and now if it's just English, how is that going to go from like Indian or English? I mean, most of the people in India will speak English, but not everybody in Korea is going to speak English, and that will be the problem there. So stay tuned to see how that's going to pan out. But from what I hear, also this 10-player roster, the original other Indian players should be staying in this roster, so they could have a full Indian squad. And that could be a great practice partner for this team, too, to actually build that synergy that we're talking about. So let's see what happens with that. I mean, I'm truly excited about Global Esports. I'm also mostly excited about Bleed Esports with whoever they picked up. But we'll talk about that another time. Because it's time for a break, man. It's time to go into the segment. It's going to take 3 hours after the break. First off, big thank you to Twitch once again for sponsoring the stream. Another week of Valoranting, some more money being put into our pocket. So thank you so much, Twitch, for that. When we come back, though, we're going to have MikesHD and also JamezIRL to come on and talk about a recent matchup during the LCQ and dig into their thoughts and their thought process around this matchup between Cloud9 and 100 Thieves during LCQ after the break. If you've enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the bell for the future noties, but also comment below with what you'd like to see in our future shows. What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to Valoranting with Vansilli, Anderzz, and Tanner Metro. This is going to be a little bit of a change this time around. Big shout out to Daniel, our producer, for this idea. We decided to bring along here coach of 100 Thieves, or analyst. I don't know what the fuck your title is, Mikes, but you're coming on the show. And then we got JamezIRL, formerly of Cloud9, to come on the show with us to talk about a head-to-head matchup about their lower bracket game in the semifinals, and an elimination game during the LCQ. So C9 coming in as the winners of 2021 LCQ, getting dethroned by 100 Thieves. I'm going to preface that just to say, James, how's it going, brother?
Yeah, I mean, that is what happened, so that's a fact. I like dealing in facts, so I'm pretty happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Mike, how are you doing today, brother?
Doing good. Thanks for the introduction. Were you workshopping that one before or after the spike rush until 5 a.m.?
I should have taken that break to actually figure out how I want to do the introduction instead of like copy-pasting what my 20 wins, 40 losses, and spike rushes were to try to get the battle pass done. But we got it done, guys. We got it fucking done. But let's get into it, man. I think this is going to be really fun to like dive deeper into your brains around the preparation that came about this matchup that was super important, of course, during the LCQ to have a shot to play and represent North America into the Masters/Champion stage. So with further ado, let's get into this, man. I want to first go on and talk about the agent composition, starting off with you, James, because I think this is one interesting composition to look at for Cloud9. This is a comp where you guys went double controller with an Omen and a Viper. You had a Raze in there and a Chamber, but you weren't using a lot of like the KO or the Breach that's like almost a must-have for a lot of the fan base that watches matches on Fracture. So I wanted to know your thought process into like the pros and cons and how you want to take advantage of the strengths of this composition.
Yeah, I always think like common knowledge about comps and stuff it's whatever. I feel like everyone should just think about it for themselves. But I think this comp is definitely viable. Usually when you see double controller on attack side, you can play the rounds out a little longer and have more control just by the nature of how it works. And then Breach is obviously OP on this map, whatever that means. You know, it's hard to quantify what these words mean. But I think you can get a lot done with Fade, and you don't necessarily have to explode on things if you have double controllers. You don't need the Breach. Obviously, if a team knows that we're not going to play Breach, then it opens up other agents for them. But, you know, it's hard for people to bank on stuff like that. When I looked back at this matchup, I don't necessarily think the game was won or lost based on the comp. Like, a lot of the rounds come down to, like, really sick plays by people, and it was just like a good match. So I'm actually kind of excited to look at it like many months in the future, you know, after playing it, because like I think it's healthy to do things like that in life, you know, take your emotion out of it. So
for sure.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure, man. Looking forward to dive deep into this. And for you, Mikes, the preparation around this for this composition for 100 Thieves on the other end, is what we would call a little bit more conservative, right? You have this KO, you have a breach, maybe not a neon that a lot of teams have been running overall, but what is the thought process of 100 Thieves going into Fracture on this comp? I guess a composition as well for Fracture for both of you guys, where it's not necessarily a composition to try to anti-strat each other, because you have to play and set for a whole weekend of matches with the same comp, most likely.
Yeah, so I mean, going in before we played Neon, but that was the day before we played Sentinels, and I went to like 5 OTs on that map.
Yep.
So you're sitting there thinking like, okay, we just showed everything going into that match. And then I think the comp that C9 runs is really good. Xset runs something similar. FPX, I think, did at 1.2. A bunch of EMEA teams love it. So you're looking at, you know, Viper. Fade, I think, is actually a really good counter to Neon, because the prowers just latch onto you for whatever distance. Hopefully they rework that at some point. But it's kind of like, okay, we got to figure out how to get around some of this annoying stuff so Peter just isn't running through Viper walls and stuff like that. So we decided, okay, we could swap him to Raze. You can use the Boombot to like get info behind the Viper stuff constantly through one-ways. Issue was we obviously had a day in between, so we only had the warm-up scrim to really prac that, because we never run this comp before. Obviously, you're only changing the duelist, and Peter's really good on Raze, so we felt pretty confident in it. It was just more a matter of looking through the basic stuff, you know, like we look at, okay, they run Fade, so what are the eyes they like to run, stuff like that.
All right, awesome. Well, let's have a look at this pistol round. At the same time, Tanner and Anders, I'm gonna have to ask you guys to open the chat up in our call as well, so we could pass along our questions, because, you know, little trade secret of how we're able to do these sweet transitions between us three. Pistol round is going underway. As everything was mentioned before here by Mike's James, is that they've showed everything playing a Neon in that previous matchup. This time they're against Sentinels. Now they're coming with a Raze, they're coming with this double flash. What is the reasoning now behind C9 seeing this composition and saying, oh shit, let's actually 5-man hit towards the A halls? What are you trying to bait out at this point?
I feel like we would just like to get info as early as possible, as cheaply as possible, with as low of risk, unless somebody wants to go for a pick. So that's what we're doing here. We feel like it's a nice way of opening the roundup. Interestingly enough, this happens, which is a perfect example of, even if you can prep for something, you don't necessarily always know when it's going to happen. We knew that Stellar likes to play on sites with KO, like bottom site A, like they like to put him on a site, and he still plays it to a T. So this round Stellar just goes hard, you know, like that has not very much to do with comp. I mean, obviously it's good for KO to do that, but like this was just a play that somebody made, right? Like
for sure.
I would say the reason why we're emboldened to go fast towards A halls, you know, we're obviously going to take into account their composition in the moment, but it's not like we have like 4 different defaults cooked up in case they don't play Neon and they play Raze, right? Like you kind of rely on your players to have a brain and be able to solve all those things in the moment. So comp and all those prep things only goes so far, you know, you need to play the game.
For sure.
So I just want to go back to, so in a perfect world, obviously Zeppa dying at the beginning, that sucks, because now you're pretty, like, your consistent info, because that eye is going to be coming back online, is gone right at the start because of the paint shells here. And Leaf has a Boombot, so obviously you're not on the server with them telling them what to do, but in a perfect world, Leaf Boombots, you know, bottom A site. Was there ever a conversation or a thought back to this and not using that utility and kind of just dying for free? Or is this just, like you said, one of those rounds where you just shake it off because you're like, well, fucking Stellar did Stellar things?
They're contacting out, they're making the decision in the moment, and it could go well, right? Like they very easily could have got this kill had he been looking there. Like it just is a play that goes one way or the other.
Okay.
You know?
I think the walkout's a really good call in a 4v4. We're probably playing like most people in a 4v4 on defense are going to go into like a standard 2 on each site. So contact out, you catch Stellar, maybe he pulls a piece of util out or he's not watching that angle, then you're in a 4v3, only one other guy in that area. So I like the contact out. Obviously didn't work out because we had been playing people on sites more often, like James already mentioned, but yeah.
That's super interesting. So I'm going to take the exact opposite angle on that, Because James, you had mentioned that like you knew Stellar wanted to like he had a propensity to play these like on-site lower A sunk cost positions. Where you're sitting on full suite of Raze util, like why is there not a boom bot there? Is that like a conscious decision where you're opting into the contact play instead for a specific reason? Because like you had Raze nade and boom bot to like full flush lower side if that's something you knew was potentially there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like you said, we're not in the moment.
Yeah,
Like the players have to make a decision. Like and I'm not gonna be one to say like, oh, your brain is literally suboptimal. Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like if a player ever thinks you're like coming at them like that, like they're not gonna want to ever hear your opinion.
You're not coaching for a while. Yeah.
Like, you have to like, even if you watch yourself play, like everyone's making mistakes all the time, and like it's really hard to like say when somebody isn't making mistakes, right? Because like sometimes there is a benefit to playing slightly more alpha in certain situations, and it's like, where do you draw the line between mistake or not? So it's like, you know, they probably remember hearing the prep about he's on the bottom site, and I'm not gonna, for every piece of prep, I'm not gonna be like, all right, when we're in this situation, make sure you use this utility, like because of this, you know, because there's not only one bullet point of prep. There's many bullet points of prep. That's one of them. You hope people keep it in mind. I'm not saying this like we made a mistake. I'm telling you guys the truth of the situation. It's
For
like,
sure.
You can't jam people up about like small decisions like this, because like they're gonna be their own worst enemy. Like, in my opinion, I think the best players in the world are the players who are very self-critical, because they're already unconsciously doing that. Every time they die, they're probably like, "Ooh, what could I have done better?" So, like, I don't know. I don't really have much more to say about this situation.
For
to
sure.
be honest.
Really feels like the Tom Cruise style that we always talk. That I always talk about. You know, he dies and comes back, and is always learning every single time he's facing that situation again. How can he do things and upgrade? And speaking of though, enabling players and whatnot, going back to one more question about that pistol round for me is maybe Asana's paint shells going into A main after he boombots, right? So boombot opening the door, Asana gets into the door, nades and does a lot of damage. And for me here to ask you the question, Mikes, is how much are you enabling Asana in the game plan overall? Because the storyline around 100 Thieves in the past was like, oh, it's always Dicey and Asana, the Zoomers, let them open up, and then once they die, let's let the Boomers clean up. Is that still the same type of like train of thought, seeing how Asana is currently playing in this new roster, if I could put it that way?
I don't think it's remotely close to that. I think for me, when I'm designing things, I'm always thinking about how can I play to people's strengths, and this is something that teams at Scrim does know. Derek and Asana controlling A main, that's like their bread and butter before we started playing Neon and even after. So it's just kind of like, okay, this is our highest value impact, is those two controlling A main. They have really good synergy together. Is it going to be pretty all the time or the most effective util? No, but at the same time, he gets so much chip damage here, gets one kill. There is a world where he kills Mitch there too, gets 5v3 off the rep, maybe gets out, but I feel like playing to players' strengths is ultimately like the end goal, and not focusing on like, okay, he's a duelist, everything we do must center around him, or he's a star player, everything we must do must center around him. I think each player has to be valuable in their role at any point in the round.
Well, let's get into that then. Playing to their strengths, right? You guys have won pistol round here for 100 Thieves. You've won the second round against the Eco, that C9 head. Then you get into your bonus round in round number 3. And playing to that strength, is it more with the lower rifles that you had to try to work out a plan? Is there a protocol around that as to when you're running your strats or when you're prepping into a map, what is going to happen round 3? Should A, we win the round and play the bonus, or 2, we've lost a round and we're going into a gun round against a bonus? Do you have 2 different scenarios for that round number 3?
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking. I think he was going towards me, but we can
I'll pass
answer.
the question to James after for sure. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah,
My bad.
So I mean, we always have like ideas for what we want to do for the bonus round. This is just something super simple. At the start of the round, we'll Peter dish, or Asana, sorry, always have that habit, but and then there's playing he TPs out eventually, and then hopefully they don't clear Asana in the corner after he TPs out, because they figure most people just make a lot of assumptions that, okay, Chamber TP'd out of this area, we probably have it for free now. That's just something that people kind of have as a protocol in their mind. Now the space is open. I think he jumps down a bit here early because he feels pressure from A main because they started making or throwing util towards spawn. So that was a little bit of unlucky timing. But yeah, you're always thinking about how can you convert this third round? Because being up 4-0 is so powerful in MR12.
Yeah, for sure. James, you were going to tag on to that as well. What were you going to mention about your gun round versus 100 Thieves' bonus?
I actually think what they did here was kind of nifty. Like they breach stun B stairs, but they set up like their fight somewhere else. So I thought this was hard to read. So it was a good strat by them. Good small simple thing, right? Like it doesn't have to be like the craziest idea in the world to have good impact. And even though we didn't fall into the trap, they gave themselves a good chance to win the round. So I think that's all you can really do is set yourself up for success.
For sure.
And this round specifically, the first buy for Cloud9 is very slow. Obviously, it's the start of the game. We've only played a couple of rounds, but it's very slow. Were you able to pick up on any tendencies from 100 Thieves in, like maybe like Asuna getting a little antsy, or is that something that you were kind of expecting coming into this matchup?
Well, I'll put it this way. So pro players know the player personality of each other, especially if it's within a region. Like all the guys on both of these teams kind of know how the guys on each of these teams play more or less, right? Aside from that, we detail rounds that we've seen often and all right, you see this, like cool, like get it in your mind so you can come up with a good reaction, or let's talk about one now. But yeah, in general, we're gonna play a slower style with our comp, especially against their gun type, right? Like we don't want to be having any untradeable deaths, right? That's probably number one on a round like this. And you want to like favor the fights for yourself. So like just don't do anything unnecessary. You have double controller and you're against like a suboptimal buy. Like most of what they're doing should not catch you off if you have the attention span. So just play the round like that. And then we have a few ideas about how we want to have slow rounds develop, and then people can make adaptations on the fly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I enjoyed watching about C9 in this game versus 100 Thieves, because I know we talked about the composition at the beginning of the game, and of this game, and we talked about how you don't have like the big flashers, with the exception of Vanity's big paranoia. Then you have to go with a lot of these fundamentals of like, okay, retaking space in the mid round, and then double swinging, taking space back together. And I think those type of fundamentals that you see in attack FPS for C9 shines very well. Which is why I definitely see a close game here, and we'll touch on that a lot once we get into these later rounds. And I want to get into those later rounds sooner than later. So let's hop over to round number 6 here, where I want to bring the question over to you, Mikes, where there's always been this storyline around 100 Thieves as to like, oh, Will only bought an operator like twice in the fucking game, or if he's going to play Jet, he's always going to be rifling and stuff like that too. We see definitely a lot more opting for Will on a chamber on this map, but is that also a game plan to not enable Will to op as much in the other maps overall?
It's kind of on a case-by-case basis, I would say, because there's some maps where, let's say you go out and you lose the first 3 rounds, you get bonus or whatever, it's pretty hard to get an op in your hands at that point. You're going to be struggling the rest of the half. So I think there's a lot of scenarios like that people overlook. And then sometimes there's just a comp difference. Like this comp is really annoying to op against, I would say. Like you have to deal with the Viper stuff, one-ways, lots of people with movement abilities. We get bailed out there pretty easily because that was like an underpass setup that we normally do, where if Pierre's on Neon, he can jump spot tree, and then Will's opping arcade. Luckily, we kind of get bailed out. We still almost flubbed the end of the round here to Mitch, but I thought he was pretty close to winning that.
That's interesting, actually, as you were talking about the double controller. I think that's also that game plan to try to not allow any oppers on the defense or even on the attack to get a good positioning here, James, for the team, and you can maybe exploit that a little bit more.
Yeah. I think something we could have done better, now that I'm looking at this again, is or a different game plan, not necessarily better, but another viable game plan would be to like have more consistent arcade pressure, because like they feel really comfortable playing arcade early in the half, I've noticed.
Mhm.
And like even though we get this 1-for-1 or whatever, we get doubled here, he wouldn't feel this bold to go through the wall like this. Like this setup is so hard for us to trade out against an op. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even if he doesn't get two there, like it's still sick. And like, I guess if our game plan was a little bit different, then they wouldn't have such a sick setup there. I think arcade's like a really interesting part of the map, because if you look at retakes on this site, if the defending team, the team that's retaking B, doesn't have arcade, and then the like attackers have that three-way crossfire from stairs, arcade, and tower or site, like it's pretty effed for the defenders.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think arcade's like a really important part of the map.
Yeah.
Very
And
important.
actually, yeah, and moving on into round number 7, or just looking at that arcade position in general, because Curry sets up that wall pretty much every single round on the attack too. And of course, there's one mentioning into conditioning. The second one is, as you just mentioned, into the terms of a retake towards that B site. But overall, what is the idea of C9 on the attack site, not even taking arcade that many times, despite the wall always going up on that arcade position throughout this game? Was it like trying to pivot the A site, rotate, and just hit A on the weaker site? What was the game plan around that wall conditioning on the attack from Curry?
I don't want to over talk again because Mike hasn't gotten to talk. We were missing this round, but it's basically just how the players feel based on what we've done in previous matches. Because we've ran this comp before in a recent match. We didn't change comp, but we had different style of starting rounds, and other times it was starting heavy arcade. So we're just kind of keeping people on their toes as to like how we're gonna play.
And I guess now, as James was alluding here to you, Mikes, is there anything that you were seeing as the analyst here for the team, figuring out what they were trying to do around the Viper wall on arcade a lot?
Again, I think it's just pretty annoying to deal with. We kind of talked about it going into the match, because it entirely changes where you can place the chamber trips, stuff like that. So we also felt like Raze might be a better pick, because it's if that wall's up in the mid round, maybe you can boom bot, reclear arcade, something like that. Raze nade behind it to deny them space, just little things like that. That makes it pretty annoying. And obviously then, again, going back to the op comment, can't exactly get op lines all the time, because they could be crossing under, they could be in the cubby, could be behind the box, just makes it really annoying. But we felt like overall in a lot of these rounds, after the first two, it was a lot of not playing our game as much and keeping map control. We felt like this comp that they run is really good at denying info, taking space, so it's kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts. And at any time they can do something explosive like this, so Belief goes out. Lots of players just over peak there. He does a really good job of staying alive so his teammates can collapse on them. And then both of our guys are just kind of caught out in the open thinking they're going to get a kill. But yeah, that's kind of like the basis of it with their wall. It's just this map too, on defense, you have to be so good about maintaining some amount of space. You can't retake from spawn 24/7. You can't play on the sites 24/7. So
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be my question. This round specifically, the three remaining your B side players, they all rotate and come through spawn. And obviously Rolling Thunder available. That's maybe one of the better angles to be coming from, because you do hit so much from that. But this is kind of a question for both of you holistically on Fracture. Mike, I'll start with you. How important is it to kind of retake or play around these extremities when you are retaking a site? And are there things where, like in this round, you have that Rolling Thunder, so you say, okay, let's go through spawn and we attack this way, right? What are kind of some of the factors that change maybe what your idea of always playing extremities on retake versus playing through spawn?
Sure. So I think it kind of depends on obviously what util you have left, what comp you have, what type of buy they're on. Again, we threw in some stuff this event because we noticed that in VODs, a lot of teams weren't using util to clear sites. That's why we had like Eden playing on site. Obviously, Chamber can play on at any time and get out. But generally, we feel like at least on retaking, you have to flank a lot. So at the start of this round, something that we could like nitpick in this VOD would be like, okay, we killed the Chamber. He's holding the flank after the round. We could probably collapse on that with having one or two guys flank and then the spawn guy waits. But obviously, it's just kind of like James was saying earlier, players make decisions. You have to have faith in those decisions when they happen. But yeah, I think overall, playing around extremities is a lot more consistent value just because a lot of the spaces that attackers can play from and just play post plant from the mains, you can get the site most of the time. Like you can play retake A, they'll let you out spawn, they play from main and dish, and then it's like, okay, they're brim molly, now we're getting flash, now we're getting neon stunned, whatever. Just makes it really hard. So I feel like the quadrants of the map are always really important to play around, especially on retake.
And James, do you share that same sentiment? Do you have like specific protocols where you do think pushing through spawn all together is better than playing the extremities?
Pushing through spawn altogether is better
Like,
than playing any
yeah,
of the
like
extremities. If we
retaking
have
through
a
spawn.
if we have a specific plan for it, I don't know. I feel like thinking like that is like overly simplistic. It's like if you just play the situation in a winnable way and you honestly think it's winnable, then it's justifiable, and that's what matters, right? It's not like, hey guys, let's brainstorm ways of playing only from spawn today. I feel like that's like overly simplistic view, but like I think another thing is like, let's say that you lost a winnable round from a scrim and you happen to be playing spawn and you're just like, hey, how could we have played this better? And then that way you're like naturally coming up with like solutions rather than protocols. I feel like protocols are like, is like a word that triggers me because it makes it seem like everyone like memorizes these like rules by which to win. And it's like, it's not like that. Like, I don't know.
That's interesting.
Like like there's many roads to Rome. There's many like ways to win around, and it's like you just have to like be smart about it. Is like the best way of saying it. Because like you can definitely play all from spawn on defense if you have a good plan. Like if I put my Viper wall across tower and account for arcade side, and then we do something to account for stairs. Like it's totally viable. But to like say it's always or this or that, like I don't know. I think people should get out of the mind of protocols, to be honest.
That's super
You're gonna add
interesting to
something,
me.
Anderzz? Go ahead.
Yeah. So conceptually, like I'm very much so of the same mind where like I would never deal in absolutes, but I think that just based off of the success of repeatable patterns, do you not see value in like very explicit recognition of certain situations and having set reactions to them? Like
Yes, of course. There's certain
okay.
situations. Yes, of course. There's like really optimal solutions to things that happen often, and most people know those things, right?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, because
let's say
that's
that
what I consider protocols. So when you're like, "Oh, protocols trigger me," I'm like, "Wait, what?" Where
Yeah,
are we
but
going
it's
with
like,
this?
yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like, well, can you explicitly say one that you know is like a good one? I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm just like, I want to know like what is a hard and fast rule that somebody can stand behind and actually tell me is a protocol. Like, can can you stand behind it and like
Oh
say
yeah,
like
absolutely. Like
really draw
so.
out the full situation? Because then it's like,
Oh yeah, Icebox is the map
like,
where it's super easy to do it. People say that the map plays super linearly, and I think that it's like that perceived linear nature to the map is actually because of how fleshed out protocols are. Like a double or triple flank push through of A being like a very set defined push protocol was like the crux of why Fnatic was undefeated on it at Champions 2021. That's something that I drilled into them like no tomorrow. Like we even had set op channels where like Durka would scale from pipes. Like I'm not gonna waste it because we're talking about Fracture here, but like I'd love to pick your brain offline because like I'm a huge fan of protocols, especially explicitly hashed out ones.
yeah, of course you want specific strats, but it's like I don't think you need them to succeed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure it was like there's many roads to Rome, there's many ways to win. And there is a place for protocols, but like I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to see I would like to see what yours are, because like I don't
Yeah,
think it's
for sure.
I don't think it's natural to like just have a Rolodex of protocols. That sounds very rigid and like kind of for like noob players, to be honest. Like that's something like it seems weird. but maybe I'm just too noob and I don't understand how to correctly craft them. So
I think
maybe you just need to teach me. I don't think you need to pick my brain.
I think it's neither black nor white sort of thing. I think it's a balance of the two. I think it's important to like have that Rolodex of protocols, but like still have the adaptability and the flexibility and the understanding that like these are dynamic.
Yeah.
You're still going to run into scenarios that don't exist within that Rolodex, but you do have it for when they do happen.
At least
Fair enough.
sometimes when we hear about you know, a lot of protocols as like a fan or somebody who doesn't, you know, live and breathe all the strategies around Valorant, I hear protocols, I hear tendencies, right? So to go back into the game here in round number 8, Mikes, this is probably where Sean calls a timeout into the match because you know, after losing your bonus, he's also lost 3 rounds in a row, and there was at some moment you needed to find a way to like stop the hemorrhaging that C9 was starting to come back here on the attack. So what was the conversation going around this timeout? What did you notice that C9 was doing, and what were you trying to explode? Yeah, after this round, the timeout was called here.
Sure. So that's something that we talk about a lot in terms of, okay, have we used up the effectiveness of our game plan at this point? Have they adapted? Obviously, they have a bunch of really smart players on that team, so they don't necessarily need a timeout to adapt to our stuff either. Just the same with our players. We feel like they can adjust on the fly without it. We just kind of went back to what was working at the start. So we switched back to Austin and Derek working A main. They're just holding it down. And that was one of the main things. We felt like as more time was ticking off the clock, they were winning a lot more, mostly just because they had the entire map, right? So you're just down to playing the sites and spawn, and you don't really have any info or a good setup because, again, bomb sites are really hard to play on. They adjusted pretty well to what util they could use to flush us out of those positions. So that was kind of the main thing. It's like, okay, we need actual map control, protocol type of thing. Like, okay, maybe some of our retakes don't feel good, so we're going to go back to what feels comfortable for us, which is flanking on retakes, taking that map control, catching people off guard. So that was kind of like the basics of the timeout.
Yeah. And then that timeout leads into that round number 9, sorry, because that was the timeout that was called. But I think, James, you took advantage of that timeout to correctly read what was going to happen against 100 Thieves on that round 2, because that round, if I'm not mistaken, was the round where Asuna was going to have, Leaf was going to have the showstopper, and you were trying to hit towards this B site. But the protocol, quote unquote, if I could put it that way, of you guys trying to hit that site was really well done. But the only thing that sucked was that the nades actually didn't land into the boxes of where that I think it was Bang that was playing those green boxes to be able to capitalize on that round.
Yeah, that's my fault. I didn't drill him enough on that hit. So
actually, you know what? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about those drills too, because as much as you guys are putting into a lot of these game plans, right, for getting ready for the matchup, how much then comes into the lab of like, okay, we need to actually practice these satchels. How many hours goes into, especially your duelists such as Asuna, such as Leaf, to be able to land that in the most specific way in the best timing possible? Because of course, behind all that is all flashes, all utility, all that needs specific timings.
Yeah, so I would say that all of that preparation, like the worrying if somebody has the skill to do the satchel, is like far before this, you know, these matches.
Yeah.
And like if there is a set hit where we have set pathing, for me, they will have drilled it multiple times. I'm not obviously gonna like give up the secret sauce and say the exact schedule. Like that's a whole nother topic. Is like coming on these things for a coach is like a really interesting thing, right? Like how much are you gonna tell everyone? You know, because it's not like I'm a player where, you know, I still have my ability to play as kind of like my value, but like as a coach coming on something like this, it's like you're basically just giving up your full value to a certain extent.
Gotta protect the brain trust.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just want to say, you know, 20 minutes into this conversation, maybe 30 minutes into this conversation, I am in way over my head. Okay, I just want you guys to know that if I say something stupid, you can tell me that I said something stupid. Okay, I am just a lowly play-by-play, and if I offend, then I don't mean to offend.
I respect it, Tanner.
Yeah.
So I just want to say,
yeah,
I'm drowning here.
That's the most attractive thing, is when somebody has lost the need to try to stop seeming like an idiot. I feel like that's like ultimate maturity is when you're no longer afraid to be an idiot.
Yeah.
Okay, so
sure.
now
He just
this
called you
is
attractive, Tanner.
Hey, James, I don't know. I think we gotta do something offline too, Anderzz.
It's
I'm
an
gonna have to take your
attractive
time
character
with this.
trait. I don't know, man.
Hell
Nothing wrong with that.
Hell yeah.
I want to ask this, and this is more general because I saw a tweet the other day. It was during the Game Changer stuff, and it was actually Grego who said, "Yes, please call tactical timeouts. I love when other coaches give me a time to speak to my players." Is that something that you guys are actually thinking about and taking your tactical timeouts, or I guess we have 3 coaches here that can answer. James, I'll come to you first. You know, you took I think one of your 2 timeouts on the whole game, and it wasn't towards the end. When you do and are calling timeouts, are you thinking like, shit, well, I am giving time to the other team to also speak to their players, or is that just not a thought at all, and you guys are just trying to kind of fix the mistakes that you're making or the tendencies that you're noticing?
Obviously, like what you need is of top priority. So like, let's say the situation where the guys are literally not figuring it out, then I'll call attack, even if that tack will have benefit for the other team, right? But you're always considering it. You're always considering the value to the other team.
Okay.
You know, 100%.
Did you want to pass that question over to Mike's as well, Tanner?
Yeah, sure, yeah, Mike's. I mean, and Anderzz too. If you share the same sentiment, then you share the same sentiment. But I was just wondering if that is like a legitimate thought into, hey, I don't want to take attack because it's going to give them a second too.
Sure. I mean, I think when it comes to timeout specifically or just play calling or whatever, any part of the game, the thing that we talk to our guys a lot about is we always need to have confidence in what we're doing is ultimately going to be better. Obviously, you need to take into account what adjustments other people are going to make or things they're going to do. But at the end of the day, if you can't be more confident in your own game plan, then I feel like you've already lost the game at that point. You're already a step behind. So I think there's different elements of it. If I know like a team, like let's say they won a really clutch round or something, it's at the end of the game and you know that team specifically, people get really emotional and they get really energetic and stuff. It's like, you know, if our guys are already talking about a good adjustment here, I'm just giving them time to cool down. And obviously it can be a double-edged sword because someone could just be high off adrenaline and just get a 4K. But I think there's different things that you can weigh in there. Like I think at LAN too, that can be a big factor if you're noticing like, okay, they won a clutch round, but they're all standing up and there's like 15 seconds left in freeze time and they still have to set up on defense on like Icebox or something. They might just unravel themselves in a moment like that. So I think there's definitely a lot of different factors to take in there off timeouts, but ultimately having confidence in yourself is the biggest thing.
The way I see it is there's 4 types of tack timeouts that I would ever take as a coach. 2 are psychological. 1 is my team has so much momentum that it's getting away from them. Nobody is keeping the team in check. This is like the classic, I expect an IGL in situations like this to be like, game's not over, take it 1 round at a time type thing. If that sort of check doesn't exist, there will be scenarios where I feel like I need to make that check. Then there's the other psychological one, which is the team is spiraling. I need to rebound their mental. Then you have logistics ones, which are basically what Mike's saying, where it's like, this is only really going to be relevant on LAN. It's like, my team is literally not going to like have time to get their shit together. I need to call this tack so that we can regather ourselves and get a strategy out. And then the 4th one, which is my favorite, is I have a call that is 100% going to convert us around. That's like, it's interesting because like a lot of people, when they think of a coach calling a tactical timeout, they're like, oh, it's tactical. They're just going to give them strategies. Only one of the 4 types actually has to do with tactics and me giving a strategy. And I'm only ever going to call that type if I feel like I literally have the best read on Earth.
And 100 Thieves fucking does that with 100 Thieves, like, hey, tactical timeout. I'm gonna give you the strats for the next 8 rounds. Just fucking win them out, man. I don't know what you guys are cooking up in your timeouts, but it's working.
And that's it, right? Because at that round number 9, that timeout comes out for Sean. There's that discussion, and then 100 Thieves end up winning the last 4 rounds of the half, right? So we're moving into the last round of the half. James, you're sitting on the sidelines right now. What was the conversation on your end, looking at the past 9 rounds, trying to figure out how you could close out the last 4 rounds to the best of your capabilities, and what happens in your mind when at round number 12 it's another round that's lost against 100 Thieves here?
Is the round gonna play? Because
yeah, we'll have it up here. Yeah.
Okay. So how do I put this? I mean, what's going on in my mind is a whole different from the players. But in general, I would say that the way I like to set the culture is that you play the round at hand. You just, all you worry about is the situation at hand. Like, I don't care if I've lost 4 in a row. I don't care what the score is. I'm playing these few seconds ahead of me as perfectly as possible. So like, I think that's really important, to just be in that zone, kind of like zened out. Like I'm just playing it. Like I don't really see the scoreboard. Obviously, there's certain situations where you need to make a different economic decision based on the scoreboard. But you still play the round. I actually reviewed these rounds today because I knew we were going to be on this show, and like the way that we lost those 4 rounds heading into the half were like really dogfighty. Like there's this one where Bang gets like a double and like randomly doubles a guy, like, and it was like it was like the thing that turned the tide of the round. So it's like I'm not trying to take away from the narrative of 100 Thieves' timeout excellence, because like their timeout excellence is awesome. Like they did it on Ascent. Like we were owning them on Ascent. It was like something really high, and then they took a timeout and then just rolled us the rest of the half. So definitely not minimizing that. I'm just saying, like, for players' perspective, you should just play the moment. Like, don't have, it's like betting. Like if you happen to play poker or something like that, like tilting is when your decision on your betting is influenced by the like weird stuff from the past. It's not your play is not based on what's happening now. So you just need to stay in the now. So
and for you, Mike's, looking at even this round number 12 again, where Will just comes out and gets to pick into B main, is that one of those moments where you're looking at, okay, the comp that we're playing against, and we mentioned at the beginning, there's not too many flashes, and there's not really many things that are just cutting your line of sight for your opper to be able to push forward in those positions? Is that, as an IGL, as a coach, you're like, okay, Will, this is going to be a team where you're going to be able to push a little bit more aggressively and play with that confidence and try to enable him more in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about what spots would probably be better to op in than not, based off of like where they put their Viper wall, stuff like that. I think Fade is a really good counter in general to Chamber, because the Prowers are just so annoying compared to any other utility. Like Raze Boombot, you could take a 50-50, see when it blows up on you if you get the shot off, but Fade Prowers are just like, okay, I have to spend so much time shooting this thing or waste my one op shot and then TP out, so it's not really worth it. But yeah, I mean, we focused again on it just controlling A main, keeping that map control, play on sites when optimal, because like you said, they don't have flashes. We didn't feel like they had a ton of util to clear us out. And something for this series, I would say overall, because I feel like when people talk about timeouts, that the credit like always goes to coaches. I would say for these 2 maps in this series, the players, before we called the timeout, were already ahead of like what adjustments we should make. Like, players are also able to talk in timeouts, like for people that are unaware or don't think about that. But I felt like on this map, Will talked about making the adjustment for A main, for having Peter and Derek fighting there, and then I forget who called it or like was saying it on the attack versus them on Ascent. But yeah, players, especially on our team, I feel like have a lot of value and input on timeouts as well.
For sure. I remember you saying that specifically, and even Dan and Sean were mentioning that, like, post interviews, talking with other people, that your players are just already ahead of the curve, and the timeout was just basically time for you guys to breathe as the coaching staff, right? Because it is stressful moments sitting in the back lines and seeing like your game plan sometimes comes to fruition or just topples down. So I can't imagine how stressful it could be watching these games, especially during the LCQ. But let's move on into at least the second half right now, because if not, we're going to be here until like 8 p.m. And I know people want to go.
It's not too bad.
Yeah, I got to pick my kid up from school. So.
There you go. So let's talk about that pistol round actually in round number 13. And again, I'm going to use the coin phrase of protocols too, because I do like how you guys actually got it.
We're actually just going to maximize how many times we can say protocols for the rest of the podcast, James, just for you.
Yeah, but I do like at least what you guys are doing here for 100 Thieves, Mikes, of like getting into the site actually, because it's the satchels from Sands from Asuna that lands onto the satchels from here that goes onto the top boxes of Sands, as you see right now. But following that, you were mentioning how it's always Derek and Austin together. That breach flash from behind, followed by the knife, so that nobody could counter back on utility on Sands, was fucking quite cool. Just to garnish that, to gather that space for 100 Thieves to try to get in. For you, James, was this something that was like, holy shit, I've never seen this stuff before, or did it come out of left field when you saw just fucking Austin satchely on top and seeing these flashes coming out?
I mean, I don't know if I've seen somebody do that. I know Mitch likes to get up on that box, and they called that Mitch box for a while, but yeah, it's definitely a good route by them. They got a lot of space. They almost timinged Mitch at dish in the beginning, and then we timinged them coming out the heaven smoke. So I guess to each their own. And I mean, when I reviewed this round again today, I just wrote down dogfight pistol round.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I think what you said is like they paired the utility and the timing of everything really well, and I think like that's the mark of like a good team that can like come up with quick explodes that are like well pieced together on the fly.
So I want to. So now that you have taken a look at it, or even in the moment, were you able to pick up on something that you thought 100 Thieves was doing that made it a dogfight? Like, were you like seeing it now? Are you kind of thinking of ways like, what we're 12 rounds into this one? Have you kind of thought coach's brain working? Where you're like, man, if we would have just changed this, then we could have taken some of this dogfight away from 100 Thieves? Because you've mentioned it a couple times now.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I never really looked at it that way, and that could be a nice way of having a proactive game plan. So no, I didn't think about it that way. That's interesting.
See? Look at that.
Look at that outsider
Look at that,
advantage, Tanner.
Hey,
Look at
we're
that.
not so stupid after all, baby.
Well fucking done. But let's move on right now into the pistols. Moving forward from the pistols, we're going to examine round number 15 here, where we're just trying to do some sort of a like slow default going on here for C9, or sorry, for 100 Thieves. I wanted to know your perspective into going into this round here, Mikes, if you remember this round.
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of similar to the pistol round originally, where we were trying to get Will set up, breach chamber combos, pretty good in any concept at A main to bait out util, get him walked up. This was something we struggled with a lot this half, where C9 were just constantly denying us A main. They were willing to dump whatever type of util, paranoia, prower to keep that control. And then we just try to go into an A split, because like, okay, dish is free, we can just split on this. These guys need to lurk up A main now. They're moving up, and then it's just mostly like a spacing thing after this point. I think these guys have a pretty good sight setup, crossfire-wise. You know, Leaf's just holding a nade out, ready for if Vandy hears anything, or if he takes contact, he can nade them off. And then they get stalled out. A main guys are trying to come out. Spacing is a little bit wonky here, but we get the trade. And then the end of the round is nightmare fuel, but pretty decent spot so far.
Well, what are you laughing about here, James?
Mike's comment.
He knows.
Look at that molly. Dude, I remember I was like, you need to know how to molly these all perfectly from every angle. So that's my one impact I had. But that one molly.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
No. I think, so looking back on just like a few of the losses I've experienced with my team on Fracture is like, I feel like these KO knives on the site get so much value. Like, if there was no KO knife, like, it's probably more than a 2-for-2 for C9 here, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously we end up winning the round, but it could have been cleaner. So it's like, I think something I've just experienced a lot over time is the value of KO on this map when site hits. So if you're going to play a certain defensive standard, you have to take into consideration KO. Sure.
I think new Fracture, it loses a bit of its value, but like the more historical way of approaching the map where like everyone's mostly playing retake A and being able to just use that knife to hard clear sight is just toxic. It's so good on attack.
There is one specific round which the KO knife was pretty good, and we'll talk about it later. It's towards the tail end of the match that I thought was pretty cool of what you guys did for 100 Thieves, Mikes, that baited out a utility. But on that round, looking back, yes, indeed, it was one a very nice snake bite from Curry. Secondly, he actually had a fucking amazing clutch where 100 Thieves kind of like threw that a bit by giving 3 individual 1v1s in the end. So I think that was, or he had another flick where I think it was also on the top site that just whiffed also that 1v1, right? So that was pretty cool to see that come back around here for C9.
It wasn't pretty cool.
I mean, like, everyone knows who made the mistake there. We don't need to say it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, the
Little
funny
things.
thing about the funny thing about a clutch is like it's only as good as what they give you, right?
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
Yeah.
so good job by Curry. He capitalized on what they gave him.
Yep.
I think
So-
people always tend to focus on like the last mistake in the round too. So people will be like, "Oh, Austin lost that round," but no one will talk about like, "Okay, the spacing coming out of A main wasn't that good. Stellar taking that fight wasn't that good." There's a lot of things leading up to it that you put a player in a bad position.
For sure.
That's kind of like, "Oh, why didn't they win this?" Even though there's 1,000 mistakes you made before that point that might be even more dreadful, I guess is a good word for it.
Like Derek probably feels like he needs to peek a little because he knows Austin is low and in a spammable position, right? So it's like
contact as well, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this weird, unraveling, and oh my god, man. So it's all about mental.
Not for you, James.
Yeah.
That's when you go, yeah. That's when you're happy for those fucking rounds, man. You're happy that you got that round turned around. But actually, I think you guys try to answer back right after in round number 16, Mikes, and I think it was actually a nice little execution that you got into the B site. I think more specifically just based off of Derek Flash into a great spot into B main. So tell me a little bit about that execution to allow Austin to get into site.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these types of rounds were just focused on gain orbs, 4 orbs on the map, so it's just kind of like ring around the rosy. I thought this was pretty decent push from them, even though they got double scanned, caught us off guard. And then, yeah, I mean, it's Peter, so we're just sending him in everywhere all the time. I thought obviously having limited util on eco, I think it's still such a dangerous part of this game. So Curry gets isolated because we used util for exec here. We have some stuff left over. And I feel like the stall from not only Derek, but the smoke Bang puts down on top site is pretty good as well to delay space. You're playing close with pistols. Thought Bang was pretty unlucky and not kill Vandy here when we breach ult them going forward. But
yeah,
this is kind of one of the dogfight rounds James is talking about where some of it was good from us, but at a point it was just Derek just won a ton of aim duels for us, just one-on-ones here. Like he's 30 HP, kills a guy, not looking at him. There's just a lot of stuff like that, so...
His mid-round presence of mind to just windmill slam the Rolling Thunder as soon as he got it as well was like round changing. Like if he
Overwatch thinking.
Yeah, like if he delays or hesitates for a second with that ulti, I'm not sure the round goes the way it goes. So
yeah,
that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I also think like outside of if it's not for that Rolling Thunder or thanks to that Rolling Thunder too, it's one of those rounds where despite you having better weaponry and also numbers, it's just hard to play that type of retake from spawn, play from spawn all the time as you see the retake is very difficult through these smoke streams.
Yes, sir. This is a prime example of it, and that's why I was thinking about it this morning, because in my opinion, like rewatching a game, there's like sometimes there's like big turning points. And I think this round is like on this map was like a pivotal, not necessarily a 180-degree turning point, but it was like this is a huge round to lose.
For sure.
You know?
For sure.
So
I mean, thankfully, Zeppa, when you guys were retaking the site, still had full utility, right? So that you could actually know that the site was open and you had to play to fight for the extremities, retaking that B site. But then that Rolling Thunder just made everything very, very difficult to try to win a run, as you can see. But then we'll move on forward here to round number 18. We get to a point where, okay, deeper into the map, deeper into the game, C9 has like fucking 5 ultimates all ready to go to turn it around in your favor, at least for C9 here, James. But then you've also realized that at some point there is just mass chaos, and the 100 Thieves don't give a fuck about the ultimates that you guys have by pushing through sands.
yeah, this round's a huge dogfight. Honestly, like Zeppa just goes hard in the paint. Like I don't know, you know, like what else is there to say? Like
Was that the plan here, Mike? To see to technically, I mean, you don't have a timeout at this point, right? And as an IGL trying to call here for Stellar, and understanding the comms, is it just like let's disrespect the ults, or what was the game plan? Just running into that.
It's just something fast that we like to throw in sometimes. The chamber obviously TP'd out, so that's kind of the thing we were talking about earlier. I think that space is open. Let's take it. We're a very explosive team on this map because that's how our comp plays. But yeah, I mean, C9 overall were pretty well set up to win that round, even if Zeppa didn't pop off, because that's like the main takeaway. Obviously, he owned everyone coming out of A main and door. But you know, Leaf is taking good space towards Arcade. That's all open, so he's going to be set up for a flank. So there's a lot of good things going on outside of that. But yeah.
And forgive me, my peanut brain, not remembering all the rounds surrounding. This one specifically, I scribbled in Mitch aggro at the start. Is that something that you guys had worked on, James, or is that something that the players kind of just picked up, saying, "Hey, let's try and get this chamber into the fight early"?
Yeah, I mean, we're as a coaching staff, like we're always exploring all possible plays and presenting, and not all possible plays, but all possible seemingly high quality plays, right? So like he's obviously practiced this kind of a play a lot. Chamber's a huge utility sponge and it got huge value. So I mean, yeah, he didn't net a frag, but Chamber's effect is absolutely ridiculous on the game. So.
And this is kind of where the peanut brain comes in, because I wasn't paying attention to whether or not Leaf was also playing that A main position in other rounds like Asuna was. Do you feel that the Raze gets more value, like playing on that B site versus playing off the Prowler Paranoia, or like, right? Because the Raze can boombot Paranoia, then paint shells if they're there, whereas the Prowler Paranoia, unless Mitch is pushing aggressively, ultimately just seems like information versus Asuna's early chip damage or frags that he was finding.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully some of the other people in here can help me come up with a calculation for value that you're asking. But and then also, even if I were to yeah, even if I were to like answer that, like, how do you apply it? What does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to start the one with higher value there and put him there all the time? Is that good? What if they know he's there all the time? Like, so I think it's just about like knowing what you can do and then applying it accordingly. Because like, yes, Raze might in certain circumstances get different types of value there. He has more like directly damaging utility, decent, like the self-sufficiency factor is a little bit different. But Mitch goes for an extremely brazen peak and gets out alive like that. It's hard to like quantify, what's of higher value. So I think this harkens back to like having the most intelligent players possible, right? Because if I'm Leaf and I'm playing B, this round because Mitch is playing A halls, sure, our team has come up with a few setups where I might be in this conformation relative to my other agents, but I'm not necessarily going to like stand at the same box and hold the same angle and play by X protocols. Like, yes, we've gone over those things and Lottie frickin' da, but it's more about like being smart enough to make an optimal decision as the round goes on.
Yeah.
So
I also like that in that clip, Zeppa throws a Nightfall, and that's round 18, if I'm not mistaken, and he's gonna have it back in like round 22. So that guy was like fucking farming those orbs and getting it ready ASAP. And then I think that's gonna be a pivotal round for us to look, of course, later on. But before we get into round 22, I want to talk about the defaults back into like round 20, because this starts off fairly slow as we're looking at 100 Thieves just trying to bait out some pivots here to C9 going left and right. But for you guys here, James, you don't really bite into the bullet of like wanting to cheat over rotation. And I want to bring that question over to you in terms of like being in the mind of a coach or in the minds of a player, understanding how the map currently evolves into a round. What are like the biggest tells from what type of agent that's going to make you think like, oh, maybe we should try to treat over the rotation to play the numbers in that sense? Like, is it a recon dart? Is it a boom bot? What are we looking out for tells?
Is this for Mike? I forgot.
For you first, James. Sorry, and then we could ask.
Okay.
Mike's,
Ooh, that's a hard one. Bucketing it like that. I think based on what the other team does is like really important. Like if you've seen them do things, then when you see it again, it might mean more. But like, if you're banking too much off reads, you could be totally wrong. Like, remember in the first half, I was like, oh, it was really cool of Derek on breach to stun a part of the map where they're not doing their big setup with the chamber baiting out and the Raze is sitting dish.
Yep.
Like, you're not going to be able to read that, because then sometimes the breach is actually setting somebody up. So it's really hard to have hard reads in the game, and they don't happen very often. It's more like small reads on the situation. Like your brain should be picking up like X amount of utility was used in these places around the map, so I kind of know I can do these things. That's how I would think about it.
Okay.
What do
Mike,
you
you had
think,
something
Mike?
to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't focus on too hard on tells unless someone is being like blatantly obvious with something. Like, I don't know, like I've noticed on your guys' VOD that with Fade sometimes is the case where that was like the main part of the default, but again, you can't deal in absolutes all the time. Be like, okay, guys, if the Fade's there, that's always what you should focus on, and then this side's weak and all this stuff. So I think it's good to notice that if it's happening in a match consistently, like, oh, they're doing this consistently, we can exploit that. But I feel like too many teams I've found in the past try to focus on the anti-strine part too hard, and then you're not reacting to what's actually happening in front of you because you're focused on why isn't our plan working? Like they're not doing what I thought they would do. So I think that's just kind of like the balance act. Obviously, like I was saying earlier, you have to be confident in the stuff you do, but also be mindful of your opponent as well and respect them.
Big Noya.
So on this defensive side, for James, is there a spot on the map? Because in this one, you have two players playing a little more aggressively towards arcade. We saw it in that last round, same thing. Viper Raze kind of leaning out towards arcade. Is there kind of just for Cloud9 and that team comp a spot on the map on defense where you think to yourself, it is so incredibly important that we get this? Was that arcade for you guys, or somewhere else on the map?
I don't go into a game saying that, but I think the players kind of naturally know what's important in each situation. So here on this round, like most people like to get the B stairs orb because it can punish somebody punishing it. Like it's that one where it's like, all right, I feel pretty comfortable going for this one, especially if a breach. There's many nice ways of getting it with low risk. So we're like, all right, they're probably gonna go there, so why don't we just take arcade and do some lame setup here? Because like there's so many stupid little angles like this, you know, if you get all the way to bench here.
Yep.
So you get a nice little 2-for-1, and then we have Mitch being super annoying on bottom A site, right? Like if we think they're gonna go B stairs, we might as well just like take something else, right? Like, all right, sure, you're gonna get your breach orb. That's great, cool. So
you guys had really good counter util here too.
I was gonna say,
on the guys
so
coming
sick.
out.
Yeah, like a TP away, you force out the people trying to swing back into Mitch, and then you eat a dog, and then you get paranoid by Vanity, and then that's just a nice little flood, nice little retake protocol, right? So
all these players are so good, man. Like watching them play is an absolute treat.
Agreed. And I think that's why, and I didn't want to touch on that topic, and we won't. I just wanted to slide it in there. But like everybody that's been trying to like talk shit about Curry overall, right? Saying like, oh, like he's not he's like he's not an upgrade to Zeta. This is a downgrade to Cloud9. Like all that shit, like out the fucking window, guys. Like you don't know what the hell's going on within the game in itself. And I mean, Curry definitely showed some skills in that matchup overall. But moving here into round 21. So after the spanking and the reply here that Mitch and company holding up the A site against 100 Thieves, you guys called a timeout here, Mikes. So of course, for step number 1, stop the momentum of C9 winning. It's fucking 10-10. You're at the brink of elimination during the LCQ. So how what's the conversation in here? Is it to calm the nerves, or is it to like try to scrabble into the tells that C9 are currently putting into their defender half?
I can't remember what game plan we came up with from this timeout, but I'm pretty sure I remember we talked about, okay, every time we do anything A main, they're dumping like paranoia, at least a prower, maybe if Leafs playing there like a nade or something like that. So we felt like that was a good way to get a lot of util out of them early, so they wouldn't have it for like the late round, like that last round we just saw. And then I think the original call here was we were gonna like fake A main pressure, just run a fake off of this, bait out all that util, and then go the opposite way. But then they pull out just a full-on tree controller here, so then we just audibled out of it. But this is something that we would do sometimes obviously like sending Asuna out, have the breach ult, okay, we can just run a fake off this real quick. But yeah, then they run the streak control, so then you're trying to catch up to Peter, who's like the fastest player on planet Earth, probably. He does a pretty good job here of living as long as he does, I think. I mean, he gets dinked, gets spammed through the smoke, so it's pretty rough for him. I think Stellar played this round pretty perfect in terms of like the post plant to be really annoying to them, because we don't really have the sickest crossfire by any means. But he uses his util really intelligently here.
Agreed. And James, you're just looking at this with like your mouth open, being like, "Fuck, man!" Like it seems as though the game plan coming out for the timeout was worked out the correct way as you wanted. It seems like, but it just didn't pan out into the result that you wanted.
Yeah, the KO. I think what Mike said about Stellar. I mean, his KO ult timing was an absolute killer there. Like imagine, imagine like that isn't there. There's definitely showstopper. Like there's so much stuff happening there, and that just makes now we're just running into a 180-degree crossfire. This is really awesome. So yeah, that was a really good like reaction by them and really good space taking by Asuna. Like, yeah, he's 9 and 15, but like if he didn't do what he did that round, like there's no way they have that good of a chance into the round, in my opinion. Like he made the optimal play. He made a play that is like at least like a 2K with a dink in my eyes. Like in terms of value or something like that. Like it's just like great reaction, sick round by everyone involved.
I remember Leaf like after this round was typing, "Man, we're really tearing it up, Pete," or something, because they had like the same scoreline the entire game on Raze.
I feel that was the case for both of those guys, and very similar to maybe even Victor playing with Optic back then, right on that neon. Like the main goal, try to fucking create that space, create a ruckus, stay alive, run all your utility, and let your team follow up because you're going to be miles ahead from the utility that you have. So I think that was a really nice way to play on yours end for 100 Thieves as well of Cloud9, of course, which is why we saw such a close game. But I think as you mentioned, James, about this KO, the KO pick from Stellar being a thorn on the side for C9 on the defense. I think the next round also kind of shows that a bit too. And I'm going to tag back to what you were saying as well, Mike's coming from the timeout where you're saying, like they're using a lot of utility towards the A main site when we're actually trying to up the pace a little bit, right? And what I liked about it was the beginning of the round, you guys just went with a full fake with at least to bait out the utility at the start with Derek, Asuna, and even Stellar's knife from spawn into A hole. So talk me through that exec to bait out that nightfall from C9.
Well, again, it's just kind of like if you see, it's just when you think about how people react, right? When we come out of that timeout, we didn't like do exactly what we wanted to do, right? Because we saw them taking full tree control. And it's like, well, fuck, we're not going B anymore. That would just be brain dead. So everyone go A. Peter's still alive. But it's just kind of like when you see breach ult coming out Sands and then Peter's there, it's like, okay, what likelihood are they going to bait at least one rotate, and get some opening there on the other side? Obviously, you have to think about, could they have a chamber op posted there? Yeah, but we feel like if we get this A main control, especially that late into a game when you're thinking about pressure and stuff like that, to bait out rotates and make people over rotate or just completely give the other site. But and then hopefully, like again, like I think Peter got tons of value there, living the amount of space we were able to actually get site, even though we took a pretty long time to rotate because we had to worry about the tree control. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just something too where it's like like Sean called something out of a timeout and then they did a pretty good counter to it, obviously, like not intentionally, I would assume, just because that's not something we would just call out of a timeout normally, but that's just what happens sometimes. Things just match up like that.
Yeah. And just in hindsight too, it seems as though it looks very similar to what you guys were calling on the timeout, was that fake A this time and pivot towards B. Is your knife here that Stellar threw from spawn side into that A holes actually forced the early TP away from Mitch, including a fault line and Boombot that also forced out an early nightfall from C9. So I think in that sense that allowed for 100 Thieves to do that game plan that you guys are talking about in that timeout, Mikes.
Yeah, I think that knife is always just, like we always agreed, that was a pretty good value deal for Chambers. Obviously, it's not going to be consistent value all the time, but since we have that in our arsenal, might as well abuse it and figure out, just kind of narrow down where the chamber might be outside of that one area. Even if it doesn't tag him there, it's like, okay, what's the next part he's most likely to be at? And then this just turns into another like brawly shit show of a round. Yeah. I mean, I thought C9 had a pretty good setup here. Leaf stalled for
Look
a
at
really
this.
long
Look
time.
at this. Watch this. Look at that double.
Yeah,
Look at that
double
double.
collab.
Look at where the people are.
And then this kill. Yeah.
Oh my god, dude, that kill, that third kill he gets is the way it looked
Yep.
on my screen. I was like, holy moly, he just destroyed you, bro. Like you're standing, Vanity's like standing at an off-angle Jenny, and Derek's just running up in the middle of the stairs and just stops on a dime. That was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nice life.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Tanner, sorry.
I was just say, I think the last couple of rounds, James mentioned it kind of at the start in saying like not to take away from 100 Thieves, but the players on 100 Thieves really had some really standout moments. It started in the pistol for Stellar, and then like Bang and Derek, it was 10-10 where Mike's had mentioned the raises kind of messaging back and forth. And I think Leaf did the same exact thing, right? Not the greatest scoreline, not fragging out as a duelist, but doing his job. 100 Thieves just had a couple of rounds in those two that we just looked at where, you know, Derek picked up that rifle in an eco round and killed 3 people. And so, yeah, it's like, it's nice to hear it, like how you guys think about it, and then actually see it really come to fruition that, like, Derek
Yeah, it's really nice. I agree. It's really nice.
Feels great, I'm sure. But at least for you can say like, damn, what we were doing was working. These guys just, you know, had a fucking great day.
No, it was a really hard fought match. Like
Hurry had his like God hand round. I mean, it went both ways.
Yeah.
Like
it was a good match.
I was going to say, like, even if you replay that round again in that round 22, even though that utility was baited at the beginning on the A site and 100 Thieves pivoted towards B, just a chess match in general of how it went on that dogfight in B site, as you like to call it, James. Like, just trying to time the knife to actually not allow the showstopper to come out from Leaf on defense. Then you also have the smokes coming out from C9 to not allow 100 Thieves to scale back in after the flashes. There was just a lot of good on-the-fly utility that's being used from both of these teams. That is, it basically comes down to that. It's like those type of like small mistakes is easily capitalized overall, and that's the round changer. And even at this round, it's not a mistake really, right? You talked about that stray bullet that Vanity caught, and that was basically that turning point. So for those that, again, like me, that was looking at this composition in the beginning, I was like, oh man, these guys are playing double controller, no flashes. This is going to be a very tough matchup to play. And I'm always like, okay, well, what can they do? Are they going to do like the PRX style of like nading into and satchelating into the A side, just planning for A for pulse plans and stuff like that too, which you have been doing a bit against other teams with this composition, right?
Yeah. But yeah, you said a lot of good stuff. So this knife here was massive.
Yeah.
The brim ult, sectioning him off. This goes back to the theme of KO getting good value on this map if applied correctly. Yeah, I mean, dogfight round, players needing to make. Honestly, like that's. I would say at the top level, like what separates you as a player and a team is your ability to like make a good solution and keep updating it as the round progresses. Like, are your comms efficient enough to like keep pace with finding the optimal solution as it progresses?
Yeah.
And being able to hit the shot. Like, if you need to make a play, you should be able to make that play.
Yeah.
Based on your mechanics. And like that's what I tell the players if they're ever like changing their crosshair. I'm like, don't even worry about it. Just always attempt the correct play. Like always peek in the way that you should peek to play the round optimally. And like you can't control anything after that.
Yeah.
So
almost feels like that's something that you give a lot of credit to your team about in the past here when you were coaching C9 at this point, James. Is this also something that you echo for your team, Mikes, in terms of like the leveling up and building the round as a player as the round progresses based on your roster?
Yeah, I mean, Stellar is definitely a crosshair changer, so we don't have that solved, but he's working on it in the off season. I support it though, so I'm not much better. But I'd say in terms of like just talking throughout the round, I think that's a really important thing. One of my favorite quotes is from Greg Popovich, who's an NBA coach for people that are aware. But one of his things is like, I don't have 13 timeouts to tell you guys like what's gonna happen mid game. You know, we only have limited timeouts, so you guys gotta talk at some point about what's happening and just figuring out what's the best thing you can think of at the moment to deal with what they're doing. It doesn't have to be the best thing, like the number one option. That's kind of what we're trying to think about as the rounds progress. Like, what are some of the number one, number two, number three things we could go to win the game, change things, make adjustments? But it's better to have a plan that everyone's on the same page with than no plan at all, right? So that's how we think about it generally too.
All right. Well,
Nice.
let's move on to the last round at least here, because this is where, you know, things are getting super important. Timeouts being called as well, James. So what's going on here? How do you make a comeback? And then the only notes that I have after that for this round 23 is Derek Util and AIM owns, because it ended up being like a disadvantage situation that 100
Yeah.
Thieves capitalized on.
Yeah, so this ended up in a 2 versus 3 in favor of Cloud9 Esports. And I had a
No, you take
I
this,
definitely-
did you take my notes? I wrote exactly that thing.
Yeah, I had a setup call into this round, obviously, because it's a broken buy, so I
Yeah.
gave some kind of advice, and you know, we have a judge on the field, so the round is totally winnable. And you know what's hilarious about this round is like we've had a hero 3K from the same position in the other LCQ. It was against, I think it was against Optic or someone, and like they just ran by the guy in this orb corner and didn't clear him.
Yeah.
And like we probably wouldn't have won the game on that map had that not happened. We didn't win the game on this round, but it put us in a good situation on this round. So this was an interesting round. Really well played by 100 Thieves duo at the end in the 2v3. Extremely good micro play by these two right here. This
Yeah.
is ridiculous. Watch this shit.
Yeah, I mean, at Mike's at this point, it's so much utilities left, and you know when the utility is there for Derek, it's still winnable.
The
Yeah.
number of 2vx's that Derek basically just gifted his team this match is a little bit gross.
Yeah.
Like there was that one
Yeah.
in the first half, the eco, where like he literally uses all of his util perfectly. Is it what it feels like?
Yeah, and it's really
He's a-
nice. Like, oh, go ahead, Tanner.
No, you go ahead, Mike's.
I was gonna say, like, when they were saying in A main there, both of Bang and Derek just talking about, okay, let's wait this out, then we're gonna contact out. And Derek's like, I'm gonna hold a flash. We flash left side, and then we'll clear sight together. Then obviously they see Leaf or hear him going into that corner. Okay, I'm gonna aftershock him. I'm gonna walk up. Just like the constant communication is so perfect in that call. That was really nice to hear. And then like in this scenario, it's like, okay, he's out sands. Let's 1, 2, 3, just double peek him. I feel like the communication between these guys is like, if you were to show a brand new team that was coming up in tier 3, tier 2, what good communication between teammates should be like, it'd be those last like 20, 30 seconds. Not the half clear A main, obviously, but I'll dock some points for that.
Also, the worst two guys to have alive in that situation, right? Bang and Derek have had multiple standout performances on this map alone. So those two alive, I feel like that's, 100 Thieves, one of their best options in 2vx situations to hang on to this map. But I think it's funny that you mentioned, James, back in, I think it was round 15, where you said Curry has to know how to do this Molly lineup. And obviously, hindsight looking at this, had he shot that same Molly on that plant in under A, then this obviously goes way different, right? Because that 3-2-1 gets broken up. So yeah, this is like, it just goes back to the character, or the player decisions for Curry to kind of second guess himself and not shoot that Molly into that back corner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think champions ever think woulda, coulda, shoulda and let it get to them. They just kind of like figure it out the next time.
Yeah.
You can't get in your head too much. Like everyone that's in the server here is such an insanely good player. Like they've put thousands of hours in and they're hypercritical of themselves. So it's not, I feel like if people think coaches are just like critical, that's like a huge like misunderstanding. Like I want to not make them feel bad, you know? Like it's never a goal to jam somebody up about things.
Yeah, don't kick them when they're down.
You're speaking about players being hypercritical. I think this is also like the match where we had a camera shot of Vanity just smashing his table, right? Or I can't remember which match it was, but you talk about them being hypercritical. They want to win these rounds, so when it doesn't go into the favor that they want, and of course, guys, Tony is not that way IRL. He's like the fucking kindest guy, but also very competitive. And that's how we are.
He tweeted about that after it got clipped. He's like, the one time in my entire life I've smashed a deck during an official.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, as long as somebody's not doing that all the time, like it doesn't bother me at all. Like, yeah, he's passionate, like whatever. Like I've had situations on past teams where it is happening, and then another player will be like, "Hey, this kind of bothers me." Like, I don't think desk smashing in itself like is necessarily bad unless you know it's happening at a bad or alarming rate.
You're breaking 5 desks per week.
Yeah, they're breaking mice, keyboards, and shit.
Good thing they got good fucking tables there on the main stage. But that said, what is this? Are we watching Sliggy? Okay, I thought we were watching Sliggy playing some Harbor and
Just
just
the Sliggy analysis.
There's a slam, yeah. But yeah, competitive people, right? Competitive people, and that's it. And you know what? After that round, 100 Thieves ended up winning that series and moving on, and even winning the LCQ to go. So. I mean, that was a great match in itself. I was reminded that I casted that series. I know that it was a sick match that was casted. I always enjoy casting C9 in 100 Thieves as well. That said, too, though, I want to thank both of you guys actually for the time. This is a little bit lengthier than it usually goes into our segments, but man, we fucking appreciate your insights and all that, and I think people in the chat appreciate it as well. I see some people saying, like, I'm gonna have to rewatch this segment like 5 times just to understand every single thing that you guys are talking about when you're actually talking about breaking down the round and seeing how every single piece of utility or timing is so important into the round. Good protocols. So, I mean,
one more for the road.
I'm dead.
I go...
Now you remind me. I have to meet up with Anderzz. So yeah, hit me up when
and I actually like what you were mentioning before as well, James, where you're saying like the mindset of a champion is not thinking about the coulda, shoulda, woulda. So I want to know, like, with your mindset being the champion yourself, what's next in store for you? What are you looking forward to now?
We'll all see in due time. But,
okay.
So we'll see in due time. I don't want to like ruin anything, but
yeah.
I'm happy for every opportunity that I get, and I've learned in life that like even if you work hard, you don't always get what you deserve. So whenever I get an opportunity, like I feel very grateful. So I think that's like a lesson for everyone to think about, is like count your blessings when you have them.
I definitely see that, man. I think I've been following you since like the CS:GO days, and we had a chance to like meet each other at LCQ. And you're a humbling person, and any team is lucky to have you. And I'm jealous of your fucking chiseled body. Mikes, what's next in store for you, brother?
Shut up.
What? You're handsome, bro. What can I say, dude?
I want to hear Mike talk.
Go ahead, Mike. I mean, it's off season for you guys. What's going on with the 100 Thieves camp? Are you guys still on vacation? When are you guys getting back together?
Biggest thing is trying to figure out when we can start practice again. Obviously, I think everyone got bored pretty early on. Everyone wants to kind of make up for our champions' performance and stuff like that. Get back on the grind. New teammate, obviously, to integrate. But yeah, practicing in NA is a little bit dead right now because obviously franchise teams are still figuring out their rosters, so Ascension teams can't figure out their rosters fully yet. So
yeah,
those are the kind of things we're waiting on. But I always like off seasons and breaks as a time to reflect for myself on what I can do better and the things that I feel like we should stick with or improve on. So those are kind of the things that we're working a lot on. And then obviously moving to LA at some point will be quite the change overall for everyone, but that's kind of where we're at.
Awesome. I just also realized that every time you come on the show, Mike, you have a different headset. This time you have wireless earbuds. That's awesome. And then
astute.
Yeah. And then that said, also I want to go around the table as well to see what's next here for Anderzz, because we're in the off season for that too, for you as well.
Your guess is as good as mine, man. Still, so we're at a point now where I haven't worked directly with the VX roster since like mid-September.
Yep.
And so for me, it's mostly just sort of waiting in the wings to figure out what V1 as an organization is doing moving forward, as well as just looking for Ascension rosters, international rosters, whatever really comes my way. So I
Awesome.
mean, I am fully unrestricted at this point. Like, if orgs want to reach out, I'm all systems go.
Awesome. All the best to three of you guys in the off season and upcoming 2023. Anderzz, you have a date with James to talk about the protocols.
Oh yeah.
Tanner, I'm going to speak on our behalf because we'll see you next week on Valoranting as well. We're live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And mind you, those of you that enjoyed this segment, give a shout out to Daniel, our producer, and also let us know your comments of what you thought about that segment if you're currently watching this here on YouTube at youtube.com/Valoranting. Big thank you to Twitch as well. And on Twitter, follow us there on Valoranting, and we'll see you next week. Peace.